Chapter 60. Ning Shu could not stay on the boat for long, so she bid farewell to Prince Ku with a lot of questions. Perhaps they didn't believe that a little girl like her could solve such a big case, but these men didn't ask her what she had found out. Only Xiao Minglan said, "Little girl from the Ning family, let me know when you've solved the case so that this old man can kill some time." Ning Shu smiled and curtsied. She went back the way she came from. There was a female singer singing at the banquet. Her voice was lingering and moving. But the princes who were used to listening to heavenly music were not very satisfied. Xiao Yunsa said lazily, "This song is not bad, but singing these decadent songs is not very special. I heard that Ninu's voice on the moon-seizing lake was as ethereal as an immortal's. I didn't expect her to go missing before I even heard her. TSK, I don't know if she can be found." Xiao Yunsan suddenly thought of something and asked, "Speaking of which, little imperial uncle, why does the name Ninu sound so familiar? Why do I remember that there was a Ninu in your residence before?" Ning Shu's footsteps paused for a moment. She slowed down and walked up to the deck. The voices in the cabin continued. "Did I?" Xiao Minglan rubbed the soft hair of the beauty beside him and said casually, "The beauties in this prince's residence are like carps in the river. Other than my little Hong Yan, how could I remember anyone else?" Xiao Yunyan said from the side, "The women in these brothels have the same names over and over again. Perhaps they have the same name." "Is that so?" Xiao Yunsan did not think much of it, and continued to chat with the other princes. Speaking of which, sixth brother is really amazing. The bandits on Mount Yinshi have been causing trouble for many years and have harmed many people. Imperial father has repeatedly sent troops. As Ning Shu went up to the deck, the voices in the cabin gradually faded away and then disappeared. The two returned to the small boat and returned to the shore. Today, the emperor was very strict with the princes. Xiao Yunyan and the others only dared to take a break for half a day. They did not dare to stay on Prince Ku's ship for too long. 2 hours later, the princes disembarked one after another and returned to their mansions. Xiao Yunsan, who had eaten a bellyful of fine wine from the western regions, smacked his lips and hummed a little tune as he leisurely jumped onto the shore. He called for the coachman and other attendants who had been waiting there for a long time. They helped him onto the carriage and hurried back to the palace before dark, so as to avoid being discovered by the emperor and being severely punished again. As soon as he boarded the carriage, he exclaimed in shock, "Io! This one is truly sorry to have disturbed your highness." 7. Ning Shu smiled and nodded at him in greeting. "In order not to disturb your highness return to the palace, this one will make a long story short. Just now on his highness Prince Ku's ship, I accidentally heard you say that you had seen a Ninu in his highness Prince Ku's residence. May I ask if that is the case?" Xiao Yunsan was a simple-minded person, and he was drunk, so he didn't think before he said, "Yes, I've seen her before. She sings very well, many times better than those on the boat." "May I ask your highness, when did you see her? Last year? The year before last? How can I remember clearly?" Xiao Yunsan waved his sleeves and said, "Probably 1 or 2 years ago. It's been a long time, but not recently." Ning Shu handed the small portrait of Ninu to him. "Then please take a look at this portrait, your highness. Do they look similar?" Xiao Yunsan frowned for a long time, then said, "It's been so long, who would remember? Don't those beauties in the musical house all look the same after putting on makeup? 1 or 2 years ago, the time did not match, so it was likely that they really did have the same name." Ning Shu smiled and jumped off the carriage. She cupped her hands at Xiao Yunsan. "Many thanks, your highness. Let's see you back to the palace." Chapter 61. Huimo asked, "Where are we going to investigate next?" Ning Shu thought for a moment and made a decision. "Let's go to the Ministry of Revenue first." Ning Shu turned around and left, but she saw Huimo standing in the same place and didn't follow her. She looked back at him in surprise. Huimo's face was irritable. "Don't you feed your horse? First, you made a scene at Prince Yu's residence, then you waited outside the palace for 3 hours. Then you came to the pleasure boat, then the big boat, and finally you waited by the lake until now. I say, Lady Ning, if you want the horse to run, you have to feed the horse first." Too ruthless, too ruthless. This Lady Ning looks soft and weak, but how could she run like a spinning top? In the past, when she was with the air, she didn't even feel so tired. Only the heavens knew how he had managed to survive on that ship that was filled with the aroma of delicious food and wine. Every day felt like a year. Ningshu laughed. She didn't have a good life in her previous life. She was used to being hungry and forgot about this. She hurriedly said, Sorry, I know a very delicious wonton shop nearby. It has been passed down for generations. I will treat you to 3 big bowls of wonton as an apology. After all, she still had to rely on the horse's strength later, so she couldn't treat it too harshly. Such a good and free horse, after losing one. Xia Hoqing wouldn't lend her a second one. Soon the two sat in front of the wonton shop. The shop's business was very good. The boss knew Ningshu, so he reluctantly squeezed out 2 seats for them. After eating 3 bowls of wonton, Huiyamo put down the bowl with satisfaction. He sighed and wiped his mouth. Why are we going to the Ministry of Revenue? Ningshu had also just finished her second bowl and slowly said, She left for the capital 5 months ago. Everyone who enters the capital has to be checked at the city gates. After the guards at the city gates confirm their identity, they will be registered and sent to the Ministry of Revenue for their records. All the things that can prove her identity on the pleasure boat are gone. Now we can only go to the Ministry of Revenue to try our luck and see if we can find any clues. When she saw that Huiyamo was no longer eating, she smiled and got up. Are you full? Then let's go. Huiyamo let out a wail and had to accept his fate and continue to the next station. When they arrived at the Ministry of Revenue, it was already completely dark. Fortunately, the Ministry of Revenue had arranged for people to be on night duty. Since they had already obtained the Empress's approval to investigate the case, Ningshu didn't need to hide her identity. She directly handed over Duke Ning's token, and the bailiff on night duty let them pass. Originally, Huema thought that it would take at most 2 to 4 hours to find out the truth, but he didn't expect that the more he investigated, the more serious Ningshu's face became. Then they spent the whole night investigating until dawn. The morning bell of the Wan Fo temple in the suburbs had already rung. Only then did he take sluggish steps out of the main gate of the Ministry of Revenue. There was only one feeling: his brain was about to explode. He stared numbly at Ningshu, who was walking in front of him with furrowed brows and deep in thought. Not a human, not a human. He had finally found a second person who looked like the Crown Prince. These people were not human. A whole night of hard work did not help Ningshu in the slightest. Instead, it made her even more confused when she found out the information. It was as if she had peeled off a mystery with great difficulty, but it was followed by another mystery. And then she opened it up again and again. How could it be like this? She rubbed her tired temples and decided to go back and rest for a while. When she woke up, she would reorganize her thoughts. Suddenly, she saw Zigui rushing over in a hurry. Ningshu immediately became alert. Something happened? Zigui was a secret guard, and would not easily leave the Yun residence if there was nothing wrong. Miss, the blood letter appeared again. This time it was a word. Absolute. Zigui's face was very tense. He pursed his lips and added, This time, I saw it with my own eyes. Blood suddenly seeped out from the ground, and then slowly condensed together to form the blood letter. There was no one around. Chapter 62. When Ningshu arrived, the entire Yun residence was filled with nervousness. Many people surrounded the large blood letter, and their eyes were filled with fear. Even Huiyamo was shocked when he first saw it. The large blood letter absolute was arrogantly lying on the ground, like an evil spirit that escaped from hell. Other than fearing the Madam, Imperial Censor Yin, who had never been afraid of any corrupt officials, was now filled with panic and despair. Last time it was danger, this time it was absolute. Next time, would it be death or death? His Yin family's ancestral teachings were, be elegant, be upright, and distinguish between right and wrong. What kind of ghost did he offend? Was it really Empress Zhou who came to take his life? But what kind of mistake did his son make? Madame Yin, who had always been valiant, stood in front of Cloudleaf's bed, quietly not saying a word until she saw Ningshu appear. She suddenly jumped up. You're here. Quickly come and take a look. What is going on? Why is it like this? Since you can find Ruan Chang, and you must be able to decipher these things, right? Who is the one who is pretending to be a ghost? Hurry, hurry. When she said the last sentence, she tightly grasped Ning Shu's sleeve and cried. Madame Yun cried and cried until she collapsed. Yun Ruahue immediately helped her up, and then sent her to the East Warm Pavilion to rest with Imperial Censor Yun. The ground that Madame Yun was holding did not hurt, but it was boiling hot. Ning Shu silently lowered her head to look at the large blood letter that appeared on the ground without anyone noticing. How long ago was the ground swept? She asked. After a long while, a brave servant girl stood up and sobbed. Reporting to Lady Ning. Half an hour ago, this servant personally swept the ground. After cleaning, there was really nothing on the ground. Qing Mei and Qing Yu can testify for me. This servant has nothing to do with this. Ning Shu raised her hand, indicating for her not to make a sound. Then, her cold and calm gaze slowly swept over everyone's faces. It swept over these servant girls, swept over Imperial Censor Yin, Madame Yun, Yin Ruahue, and finally landed on the unconscious Cloud Leaf on the couch. So, you feel like you've reached a bottleneck? The nights in the South Pacifying King's mansion were always warmer than other places. The gurgling water flowed from the bamboo pipes into the bamboo mirror, Note 1, which was then scooped up by Xiahou Qing and slowly poured into the wind mantis, Note 2. Tonight, Xiahou Qing did not wear his fox fur coat. He only wore a black cloak on the outside. Under the candlelight, the red plum blossoms on his snow-white neck looked like blood. The red plum blossom on his neck was too eye-catching, almost causing her to be lost in thought. Yes. She took off the veil hat on her head and handed it to the servant girl. Then she sat opposite Xiahou Qing and sighed. Her expression was a little distressed, and she told him what she had discovered in the past 2 days. According to Chun Yang, Nainu set out to the capital 5 months ago. According to the distance between Qingzhou and the capital, it would take at least 5 days and at most half a month to arrive. However, I searched the Ministry of Revenue for more than 2 hours and found a total of 247 people who came to the capital from Qingzhou in the past 6 months. Among them, none of them were called Nainu. However, I did find this living contract signed by her and the brothel mother of the pleasure boat in the musical house's register. The signature was, Nainu December 10th, year 24 of natural selection. When I found this, I felt very strange. So I continued to search, starting from the most recent time. I searched the Ministry of Revenue with Huema for an entire night, and finally found her name and time of arrival. May, year 23 of natural selection. This means that she arrived in the capital 2 years ago. Why would Nainu lie to Chun Yang about this matter? Also, she has been in the capital for nearly 2 years. Why did she only start to look for people recently? Where was she during the blank period of more than a year? Chapter 63. She originally thought that Nainu was just a minor character who was implicated in this case. She didn't expect that the more she understood, the more she felt that Nainu was a mystery. On the table in front of Xiahou Qing was a jade pot of spring, Note 1. Inside the bottle was a peach. Ning Shu stretched out her finger and lightly touched the center of the petal, which looked like a butterfly's antennae. Her voice was like the butterfly's antennae, delicate and soft, with a hint of annoyance and unhappiness. There's also that female ghost's blood letter. I actually already have a suspect in my heart, but why would that person do this? Other than frightening the entire residence of Yun and making it uneasy, what other meaning does this have? From dangerous to absolute, what is it hinting at? The promised 15 days were getting shorter and shorter. There weren't many clues, but the implications were getting wider and wider. This made Ning Shu a little anxious. Xiahou Qing said unhurriedly, "Since the above question can't be solved for now, why don't you tell me what other doubts you have in your heart? For example, Prince Ke." Following his guidance, Ning Shu's disturbed state of mind calmed down once again, and she tried to sort out the mess. She borrowed a ladle of cold water from Xiahou Qing's book and dipped her finger in it. She slowly wrote the word 1 on the table in front of her. I heard Xiao Yunsen mention before that Prince Ke's residence had a Nainu 1 or 2 years ago, But at the time I thought that the timing didn't match, and that it was just someone with the same name. Now it seems that there's a big mystery behind it. Is the Nainu from Prince Ku's residence and the Nainu on the moon-embracing lake the same person? Why did an outsider like Xiao Yunsen remember that there was a Nainu, but Prince Ku, the master, said that he couldn't remember clearly? Was he really blinded by love and forgot? This is the first reason. Nainu's purpose in coming to the capital was very clear: to look for someone. However, the identity of the person she was looking for was tightly concealed, and she refused to mention it to anyone. Even Chun Yang, who was her best friend, was also tight-lipped. What was the identity of that sister? Why did she have to be so tight-lipped? This is the second reason. After writing these 2 words, she lowered her eyes and began to think again. The water droplets on her fingertips were a little cold, slowly taking away the warmth from her hands. However, she didn't realize it at all. She only tried her best to sort out the mess in her mind one by one, and sort it out clearly. Xia Hoqing didn't want to disturb her. He took the tea cake from Jiuxi, broke off a small piece, put it into the teapot, and carefully ground it. When the water in the teapot was boiling, he poured the ground tea into it and slowly stirred it. The aroma of tea instantly filled the entire room. It was fresh and refreshing, making one's soul feel refreshed. Ningshu's blocked thoughts suddenly became clear. She raised her finger and wrote the next number 3. After the blood letter incident, I took the opportunity to test Yunruahui. I asked him if he went to the moon-luring lake on the night of Cloud Leaf's accident. He admitted it. The reason was that he heard that Cloud Leaf went there to compete in poetry. He was afraid that it would cause trouble, so he went to check on the situation. He didn't expect to run into a servant who said that Cloud Leaf was missing, so he went to the boat to ask. As for the previous time, he gave the explanation that he heard Nainu's beautiful singing. That day he passed by and wanted to have a feast for his ears. He didn't expect that Nainu would be taken away by someone else. At first his explanation sounded reasonable, but there was a loophole. Even if he went to the boat to look for someone, when he heard that Cloud Leaf and Nainu weren't there, he should have immediately gotten off the boat and continued to look for them. Why did he have to wait there for a full 15 minutes? He was a well-known fine young master in the capital. How could he have a connection with a prostitute? This is the third reason. Chapter 64. It was late in the spring of March and April was approaching. The usual silence of the southern pacifying prince's residence was broken by the sweet voice of a young girl. Regarding this change, Xia Hoqing slightly frowned and said indifferently, "Your 3 points of suspicion all revolve around Nainu." Ningshu nodded her head after he guessed correctly. "Yes, I want to investigate her background. Maybe it will help solve the case." Xia Hoqing casually replied, "Then go investigate." Ningshu still had a problem. First, we need to investigate the first doubt. The Prince Ku's residence's Nainu is not the same as the moon-embracing Lake Nainu. We need to investigate the Prince Ku's residence first. As far as I know, the prince's residence can't be casually entered. In order to ensure safety, we need to record the people who enter the residence one by one, so that we can check them when necessary. However, the records of the prince's residence are strictly controlled, and the Ministry of Revenue can't find anything, so... She hesitated for a moment, and then her pair of watery eyes suddenly turned and fell on Xia Hoqing. Her eyes were full of expectation. That gaze was too sincere, and Xia Hoqing was forced to feel it even if he couldn't see it. "You want to ask me for information?" Ningshu was obedient, and didn't say anything. The corners of Xia Hoqing's lips curled up into a cold smile. Ah. He knew that she didn't really come to complain to him tonight. The first time was for Huema. The second time was for him to promise to save her life. This time it was for his information. In any case, every time she came to him, nothing good would come out of it. There were rumors in the capital that the eldest daughter of the Duke Ning was extremely beautiful. He didn't expect that her thoughts were even more beautiful. Xia Hoqing kept his mouth shut and didn't answer. Ningshu's eyes were even more sincere, and she continued to work hard. The tea in Xia Hoqing's hand was boiling and Ningshu was one step ahead of him to sprinkle ginger and tangerine. By the time Xia Hoqing finished brewing the tea, Ningshu had already prepared the tea bowls. She gave one to him and the other to herself. In the middle of spring he held the pot in his hand and was as silent as ice. She obediently waited with a smile. This silent contest was a contest of who was more thick-skinned. In this aspect, Ningxu seemed to have won by a narrow margin. In the end, he took into consideration that time was of the essence and that the poison in his body could worsen at any time and take his life in advance. Xiaohoqing threw aside the tea set in his hand and coldly called out, "Juicy." The young man next to him, who is more steady and silent than Huimo, nods respectfully and walks behind Xiaohoqing. With his back to Ningxu, he presses something on the treasure shelf. With a muffled sound, the treasure rack slowly opened to both sides, revealing the snow-white wall behind it. Jiuxi went to the corner of the wall and pressed another mechanism. The wall flipped over and a whole row of file shelves appeared in front of them. They were made into a very deep lattice. There were at least thousands of lattices. Each lattice had a different color and pattern. Ningxu's eyes lit up. She knew he had it. She still remembered that night when she dug the grave and her identity was exposed by him. He blurted out all the details about her without hesitation. At that time, she guessed that he must have a huge database in his hands. Sure enough, he didn't disappoint her. However, at a glance, the database in front of her had hundreds of thousands of files. It was not easy to find the file about Prince Ku's mansion. Ningxu was thinking about where to start. Before she started to flip through the files, she heard Xiaohoqing say with great familiarity, "Second shelf on the left, from the top to the bottom. All the details about Prince Ku's mansion are there. The information that is too confidential cannot be leaked out. Whether you can find it depends on your luck. See for yourself." Chapter 65. She thought that she had a good memory, but she didn't expect that this person was even better. He was able to quickly name one of the thousands of books. Ordinary people couldn't do it, but it was a pity that he was blinded later. She quietly looked at his eyes. She really wanted to know how beautiful the eyes of Prince Xiaoho, who had opened the hearts of most of the girls in the capital, were under the black silk cloth. Of course, Ningxu didn't dare to say this in front of him. She could only sigh and carry out the hundreds of scrolls in the 5th compartment according to his instructions. TSK. So heavy. Tonight, in order to hide the truth, she and Huema came quietly and didn't even bring forsythia. Huema was a servant of Lord Pingnan's mansion. When he came back here, she couldn't order his servant in front of Xiaohoqing, the master. So now she had to move all the scrolls out alone. She was so tired. She glanced at the person behind her who was sitting calmly and drinking tea. She was immediately angry. He didn't even ask for help. He really didn't know how to be gentle with women. Ningxu cursed in her heart and started to do business. Even though Prince Ku's residence only served one master and had a small population compared to the aristocratic families in the capital, since the establishment of the residence until now, the large and small files were piled up in one place. Flipping through them would make one's eyes dizzy. Solving a case was really a laborious work. "Your Highness, can you lend me someone to look for it with me? After all, I spent the whole night in the Ministry of Revenue to investigate the case." Ningxu tried to act pitiful. Xiaohoqing was indifferent and didn't buy it. "Why did I hear that you had enough sleep during the day and didn't wake up until it was time for dinner? It's reasonable to say that you should be full of energy at this moment. You can do it alone." Ningxu only had 2 words left in her mind. Accept her fate. After reading the files, they were put aside and gradually piled up. The sound of the water dripping in the courtyard indicated the changes of the sky, the stars, and the moon. Soon it was late at night. Ningxu rubbed her temples and looked up from the pile of files. She found that Xiaohoqing didn't leave, but silently sat on the soft couch next to her. The embroidered cloak with dark cloud patterns slid down and stopped on his elbow. He didn't pay attention to it. Only the finger bone in his palm was still gently twisting. The sparrow he raised was already fast asleep on his shoulder. He just sat there quietly under the window, motionless, like an immortal made of ice. Ningxu whispered, "It's so late, Your Highness, don't go to bed?" Xiaohoqing said slowly, "What's the rush? You'll have plenty of time to sleep after I die." "What did you find?" Ningxu shook her head. Not yet, but it should be soon. After listening, Xiaoqing nodded slightly and continued to be silent. In front of his eyes was still the deathly stillness of the ink-like darkness. In his ears, he heard the faint sound of a book being flipped, the girl's shallow and even breathing, and the light rustling of her clothes when she occasionally stopped to rub her temples to refresh herself. He deliberately didn't let Jiuxi and Huema help her. This woman was like the sparrow he raised on the shelf. She looked obedient and harmless, but in fact, if he didn't feed her enough, her sharp beak would peck his palm. She dared to plot against him again and again. If he didn't give her some bitter fruit, she would be more unscrupulous in the future. Ningshu suddenly raised her head from a scroll, her eyes extremely bright. She waited until the end of the hourglass mark had passed before she raised her head. Nainu really appeared in Prince Ku's mansion. I found this record. On the 17th of May, the 23rd year of Tianzi, Song Nainu entered Prince Ku's mansion. On the 22nd of July, she left the mansion. Chapter 66. The file also recorded that Nainu's age and appearance at the time, which matched the Nainu at Moon-Seizing Lake. It seemed like the night's work had not been in vain. Ningshu's gaze quietly shifted and landed on the vast pile of files. The files here were so complete, then wouldn't there be files in the Imperial Palace as well? Also, would he be hiding his own files? Ningshu had just reached out her hand, preparing to flip through the files when he wasn't paying attention. But just as she reached out to touch a scroll, before she could pull it out, she heard the silent person behind her suddenly open his mouth. His voice was slow and low, with hidden killing intent. Don't randomly flip through it. Be careful. The more you know, the faster you die. Qiao, Er's extended claw immediately retracted. Ningshu pursed her lips and decided not to provoke him. I want to investigate Yin Ruahui again. Xiaoqing pointed at another file for her. Ningshu moved it over and continued to flip through it. The tiredness from the past few days of rushing about unknowingly caused her to fall asleep while leaning against the pile of files. When she woke up, the sky was already bright. The bird on Xiaoqing's shoulder had already woken up and lively flew to her elbow, chirping crisply. Ningshu woke up and found that her body was not cold. She didn't know when, but someone had covered her with a blanket. She raised her head and saw that Xiaoqing had not gone to bed yet. One of his hands was propped up on his head as he leaned against the soft couch and slept through the night. His breathing was even, and it seemed like he had not woken up yet. Ningshu quietly walked over and bent one knee to look at him. She didn't know why, but she didn't dare to make a sound at that moment. Her gaze fell on his other hand. The ivory bone in his palm was faintly discernible between his slender fingers. Even though he was asleep, he was still holding on to this thing. Ningshu's heart was filled with curiosity. She carefully reached out her hand and tried to hook the bone out from between his fingers. But just as she touched the corner of the bone, his palm suddenly tightened and grabbed her fingers. His other hand was like the wind and like a dragon, instantly bringing her slender neck into his palm. Oh! Ningshu subconsciously groaned in pain. She wanted to open her mouth, but no sound came out. Jiuxi heard the commotion and rushed over. He didn't expect to see this scene as soon as he entered the room. His Shitzi was holding Lady Ning's hand with one hand and her neck with the other. The distance between them was so close that their breaths were just inches apart. If someone were to walk over and give him a gentle push, if it was Huiyemo who came in, he would have already made a fuss. However, he was Jiuxi. He lowered his eyes and calmly reported, "Master, it's Lady Ning." Xiaoqing was already awake. He frowned and loosened his grip on the neck that was about to be broken. He pushed the person away and said coldly, "What are you doing?" The air that she had not breathed in for a long time finally entered her lungs again. Ningshu rubbed her aching neck and used her loud voice to hide her guilty conscience. "I just wanted to thank you for draping the blanket over me last night, so that I wouldn't catch a cold. It was too painful. No wonder people said that a sleeping lion couldn't be touched. Who knows when it would wake up, it would be bitten to death." Xiaoqing put the palm bone into his sleeve and said expressionlessly, "Oh, it's Jiuxi who was meddling. What does it have to do with me?" Jiuxi was stunned for a moment and bowed his head respectfully. It's me who was meddling. I know I was wrong. Ning Shu. Xiaoqing got up and Jiuxi went forward to tidy his clothes. Noticing that Ning Shu was still standing there, Xiaoqing's face was expressionless. He said quietly, "You should have found the thing you wanted to find. Why are you still here?" He had already asked her to leave. If she continued to stay, she would have no face. Ning Shu angrily walked back to the pile of files. She picked up Yin Ruahui's file and read it quickly. She didn't even say goodbye and left directly. After she left, Josie asked if he was going to wash up and eat. Xiaoqing paused and said, "Call Huimo here." "Yes." Chapter 67. Hearing the Crown Prince's call, Huimo rushed over like a cheerful sparrow and said expectantly, "Master, are you calling me back to serve you? I don't need to follow Lady Ning anymore, right?" Xiaoqing followed the sound of the birds and walked to the front of the flower and bird rack. He grabbed a handful of bird food and stretched out his hand. 2 tender yellow sparrows flew over and used their tender red beaks to peck and play in his palm. Xiaoqing felt the soft life in his palm and said faintly, "Continue to follow her. You don't need to go back until this case is over. Also, remind her to take a look at Phoenix Terrace when she has time." Hearing this, Huimo's incomparably cheerful face suddenly collapsed. He was indescribably sad and miserable. "Do you really want me to go? Can I not go? Young Mistress Ning is so intelligent, and Miss Lian Xiao by her side is also very clever. I think they will be able to handle it. I don't think I need to add feet to a snake." He still wanted to struggle, but suddenly he found that his crown prince slightly frowned. His heart was alarmed. He quickly raised his hand and gently patted his mouth and respectfully said, "Master, I understand." After that, he turned around and continued to complete the task. When he was about to step out of the door, he heard Xiaoqing's low voice again. "Try not to let her die easily." Huimo respectfully said, "Yes." Then he walked out. Xiaoqing was the only person left in the large hall. It was spacious, bright, and quiet like water. Only the tiny creature in his palm was still playing and jumping about, oblivious to everything. Xiaoqing remembered that under his 5 fingers, the woman's neck didn't seem to be tougher than the sparrow in his hand. It might be a pity if she died easily. In the early morning, Prince Ku's mansion was particularly quiet. No one dared to make a sound. After the housekeeper of the mansion served Ning Shu tea, he bowed his head and waited aside. Ning Shu quietly ate the snacks and tea as breakfast. Huimo quietly stuffed the snacks into his cherry mouth and sighed. When will this day come to an end? It wasn't until 9:15 that the most important prince in the capital lazily got up. With him, the entire palace immediately came to life. More than 10 servant girls served Xiao Minglan like a myriad of stars surrounding the moon. One of them went to the main seat and laid down. Another picked up a cup of tea leaves and a cup of top-grade sparrow tongue for him to rinse his mouth. Another stood behind him and massaged his head to wake him up. The rest of the servants carried basins of water, hot towels, and dozens of dishes. They lined up in an orderly manner, and the queue stretched all the way out of the house. After he used a hot towel, he finally woke up completely. He glanced at Ning Shu and said, "Isn't this the little girl from the Ning family? Qin Ji has already returned to the pleasure boat. Why are you looking for this prince?" Ning Shu had long heard that this master had a bad temper when he woke up. She smiled and apologized. "It's really rude of me to visit your residence, but I'm investigating a person who is closely related to the Cloud Leaf case, so I can only come and disturb you." "Who is it?" "Nainu. Yesterday, I heard the 7th prince mention that he had seen you in your residence, so I wanted to ask you to recall carefully. Perhaps you can really remember something." Xiao Minglan smiled and looked at her playfully. "Aren't you afraid that this case is related to me? I remember that when I entered the palace when I was 5 years old, I happened to see the 6th prince being accused of stealing the hairpin. I didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth and raised an objection, causing concubine Qi to be unhappy. It was you who stood out and used children's words to smooth things over for me and save me from punishment. Therefore, I respect you and believe you." In that life, Xiao Minglan was an idle and stubborn prince until his death. Whether it was the struggle in the imperial court or the secret affairs of the previous dynasty represented by Empress Zhou, he didn't care about them. Setting up such a trap was meaningless to him. Xiao Minglan smiled and was very happy. I happened to pass by at that time, but I thought that you were very interesting and joined in the fun. You actually remembered it until now. Forget it. I have nothing to do anyway, so I'll help you. He waved his sleeves to summon the housekeeper, and listened to the housekeeper whisper a few words. Not long after, Xiao Minglan slowly recalled. Oh, so the Nina you were talking about is that girl. There was indeed such a person in my residence. 2 years ago, to celebrate the old concubine's birthday, I bought a singing troupe and found that there was a little girl in the troupe who sang very well. At that time, I wanted to make someone happy, so I asked her to teach me how to sing. That girl worked very hard and sang until her voice was out. After a long time, I forgot her name. I only remember that there was such a person. Later on, there was the anecdote of Prince Ku singing for 3 days and 3 nights at the flower pavilion, forcing the red door to open. Chapter 68. Ning Shu said, at that time, you were learning songs from her every day. You should have had a lot of contact with her. May I ask if your highness still has any impression of her? Xiao Minglan had almost recalled. That girl was interesting. She insisted on singing even when her voice was broken. I asked her if she was working so hard for something. She said that she came to the capital to look for someone. She wanted me to write a note for her to ask the yamen. It was just a small matter. I wrote a note for her. That girl thanked me profusely. After a few days, I inadvertently asked her if she had found the person. She said that she had found the person, but he was already dead. Later on, after the old concubine's birthday celebration, and the person I wanted to coax, I let the troupe out. Did she say who she was looking for at that time? Sister or something like that. I can't remember clearly. Then where did she go after leaving your prince's mansion? You go to find the third prince. He bought the troupe that he liked. Before leaving Prince Ku's mansion, Xiao Minglan ordered the housekeeper to give her the name list of the troupe, and the details of the troupe leader. Ning Shu thanked her and left. After leaving the prince's mansion, Huiyamo muttered, this Nainu is really strange. 2 years ago, she said that she had found the person, but he was already dead. After such a long time, she appeared again and continued to look for him. Could it be that she had found the wrong person? There is also the third prince, Xiao Yunyan. At that time, the 7th prince mentioned that he had seen Nainu. It was Xiao Yunyan who immediately picked her up. He told him not to think too much. But he obviously bought the person he liked. I feel that the third prince is very suspicious. Ning Shu was not anxious. After a short period of confusion yesterday, she had quickly adjusted herself. She was even a little hot-blooded to fight. Now I am not afraid of more problems. I am only afraid of fewer problems. The more clues we have, the more likely it is to solve the case. Let's go and have lunch. We will call for Scythia and split into 3 groups. It was already the 6th day. The deadline of 15 days was less than 10 days. There was not much spring rain in the capital, so the next rain was very precious. As soon as the pearl-like raindrops fell, the white pears all over the streets danced. The people all found shelter from the rain and gathered together to smile and admire the flowers and the rain as they chatted. The entire city was filled with the light and refreshing fragrance of the watery pears. However, the joy elsewhere had nothing to do with the Yun residents. A maidservant of the Yun family held an umbrella and welcomed Ning Shu into the mansion. She walked through several red doors, made a turn, and went through a long corridor to Cloudleaf's courtyard. Along the way, they didn't see many people. Occasionally, they saw a few servants, but they hurriedly saluted Ning Shu and walked away quickly. The rain gradually became heavier, and the sound of the raindrops hitting the blue tiles was particularly clear. Other than the sound of the rain, there was only the sound of the medicine being boiled on the medicine stove. There was nothing else in the courtyard. Ning Shu looked into the room through the window lattice. Yin Ruohui was guarding by Cloudleaf's side. Perhaps because he was tired, he supported his head with one hand and leaned against the side of the bed. Beside him, the housekeeper mother said softly, "Last night, young master vomited blood again. It was the eldest young master who took care of him and guarded him the whole night. Ningxu nodded and looked at the unconscious cloud leaf on the bed. Because of the poison, his face was deathly pale, and there was no trace of blood. 2 months ago, when they first met in the Plum Mountain, the peach blossoms had withered in the blink of an eye. The person who used to have bright and pure eyes now seemed to be a different person. She couldn't see the sincerity and straightforwardness of that day. Only the 4 small blood-red plum petals on the side of his neck were quietly blooming. It made Ningxu think of the red spider lilies that bloomed at the gates of hell. They looked beautiful and dazzling, but in fact, they were the claws of the tortured evil spirits in the purgatory. They reached up from the 18 levels of hell and invited every ghost to accompany them. Ningxu suddenly thought of Xiaoqing. It was different from Cloud Leaf's emergency. At that time, he was 10 years old and watched the petals in the mirror slowly take away his 5 senses and 6 senses. He went from not being able to smell the world to not being able to taste the bitterness and sweetness. Day after day, year after year, for a whole 10 years, he couldn't even see last year. How would he feel? Panic, fear, anxiety, worry, anger, despair, unwillingness, collapse among them. Did he experience them one by one? Then he took them and beat them day and night into a thick shell, indifferent and indestructible? Ningxu was stunned for a moment. Suddenly, she heard a few whispers. She came back to her senses and looked at Yin Ruohui, who was trapped in a nightmare. She didn't know what he was dreaming of, but the young master who was always gentle like jade was now tense. His tightly knitted eyebrows were full of panic, loss and panic. Beads of cold sweat kept rolling down his forehead. No, father, let her go, let her go. Ningxu was slightly surprised. She leaned closer to listen. Yin Ruohui's lips trembled violently. Suddenly, he took a deep breath and his voice became extremely sad. Don't blame me, you shouldn't have come. Nian-boom. Spring thunder suddenly sounded in the sky. Yin Ruohui was suddenly awakened. Chapter 69. Yin Ruohui abruptly opened his eyes, as if he had not yet pulled himself out of the nightmare. His eyes were unfocused, and his hands were pressed on his knees as he breathed rapidly. Ningxu calmly walked in and took out a clean handkerchief and handed it to him. She asked in a low voice, "Is the eldest young master sick?" Yin Ruohui took it and nodded his head in thanks. He wiped the sweat off his forehead and restored his clean and gentle face. He stood up and smiled slightly. I was just dreaming of some things from the past, and lost myself for a moment. Just now, did I say anything nonsense? Ningxu calmly shook her head. It was raining heavily outside. I didn't hear clearly. Yin Ruohui turned his head and looked. He stood up and walked out of the room. Looking at the curtain of rain outside, he muttered, "It's raining so heavily." Ningxu followed and looked at him with a smile. I heard that the eldest young master was traveling a few years ago, and went to many places. On the way, he met a woman who entrusted her life to him. Ningxu admired and envied him. I just haven't heard the eldest young master mention it yet. Yin Ruohui quietly looked at the curtain of rain in a daze. After a long time, he sighed emotionally. Yes, it's been a few years. Today he wore a sky-blue robe with moon gauze on the outside. It was swept up by the wind, cold and lonely. He stood under the eaves and didn't care about the wind and rain soaking his clothes. The first time I met her, it was also raining. It was the 3rd day I had just arrived in Jiangnan. It was different from the capital. The rain in Jiangnan came without warning. One moment the sky was high and far, the next moment it was drizzling like cotton. I had just arrived in Jiangnan, and was completely unprepared. I was drenched from head to toe. I hurriedly looked for shelter and accidentally bumped into her. She was holding a lotus leaf, and the green plum blossoms were scattered on the ground. The paper umbrella was also swept away by the wind. Her hair was wet, and she stared at me and yelled for compensation. A smile gradually appeared on his face, as he fell into a distant memory. Coincidentally, I didn't bring my purse that day and couldn't find a single copper coin on me. I was so embarrassed that I wanted to ask her to follow me back to the inn to withdraw money. She suddenly took 3 steps back and looked at me suspiciously. Are you going to tell me that I'm really ashamed and didn't bring any money and that I'll have to trouble Miss to come back with me to get some money? I said. How did you guess? She sneered and looked at me, then shouted, "Come quickly, gentlemen. There's someone here who looks like a human and a dog. He's a kidnapper." I was stunned. Then I saw more than a dozen villagers surrounding me with wooden sticks and poles. They wanted to take me to the yamen. I tried to explain, but no one believed me. When I turned around, she had already run away. Then I was locked up in the yamen for a night. It was too embarrassing. I've never. He shook his head and laughed softly. His jade-like face was especially handsome. She could tell that being locked up in the yamen was very hard, but his memories were very sweet. Ning Shu, who was in the audience, was also affected by his emotions. Her lips curved into a smile. The second time we met was also an accident. That day, I made an appointment with a new friend to give him a painting to admire. We met at Brocade Weaving Pavilion. That day there were many guests at Brocade Weaving Pavilion. As I was walking down the stairs, I was pushed by someone. I lost my grip on the painting and fell down the stairs. Just as I was worried that I might lose the painting, I heard a clear scream from downstairs. I stood at the top of the stairs and looked down. A woman wearing a scarlet dress was holding the painting in one hand and covering her head with the other. She was crying out in pain. When I looked down at her, she also looked up at me. I recognized her at a glance. It was her again. Ning Shu smiled faintly. It seems that it was fate. Yes. Although I've read thousands of books, I've never believed that there's such a thing as the golden wind and the jade dew. When they meet, it's better than countless things in the world. But at that moment, I knew that it was fate. Because of the pain, her eyes were red. She glared at me with anger and grievance. I don't know why, but my heart didn't know how to beat. I hurriedly ran down the stairs to apologize to her. She said, "Why is it you again, you kidnapper? Why did your master let you out to harm people?" I tried my best to explain to her. "I'm really not a kidnapper. Last time, you misunderstood. This time, I'll pay for all your medical expenses." Then I went to look for my purse, but it was gone. I thought that the person on the stairs might have been a pickpocket who deliberately bumped into me to steal money. Helpless, I could only tell her, "I'll give you this painting as compensation." She opened her eyes wide. "I thought you were a kidnapper, but I didn't expect you to be a swindler. How much can a tattered painting be worth?" She thought for a moment and said, "Forget it. It's better than nothing. At least I can sell it for 3 or 5 copper coins." I chased after her and asked for her name. She said, "My name is Bad Luck when I meet you. I'll have to trouble you to stay away from me." Later, I found out that she didn't sell the painting, because when she opened it, she found that the painting was of her. After that, I found out that she was an unregistered courtesan at Brocade Weaving Pavilion. She asked for money because several of the girls in the pavilion caught a cold. The brothel mistress wouldn't give her a single copper coin. Ning Shu listened attentively and asked, "And then?" His expression suddenly became complicated. Another bolt of lightning came from the horizon, and the rain became even heavier. His clothes were completely soaked, but he didn't care at all. After a long time he closed his eyes, his long eyelashes trembling. "She's dead." Chapter 70. Eldest Young Master. The medicine is ready. The voice of the housekeeper mother sounded. Yin Ruahui quickly pulled himself out of the memory. He nodded to Ning Shu and went into the room to feed the medicine to Cloud Leaf. When he stepped over the threshold, Yin Ruahui accidentally slipped. A small portrait suddenly floated out of his sleeve and was rolled up by the wind. His face changed greatly. He was so anxious that he didn't care about anything else. He hurriedly chased after it. "My painting!" Fortunately, a hand rushed in time to catch it before it fell into the water. Yin Ruahui solemnly thanked Ning Shu. After carefully putting it away, he went back to the room to take the medicine that had just been boiled in the hands of the maidservant. He personally fed the medicine to Cloud Leaf. His eyes were gentle and his expression was very careful. Ning Shu couldn't help but fall into deep thought. If she didn't see it wrong, the small portrait just now was of a woman's back. The bracelet on the woman's wrist was exactly the same as the one she saw in the brothel yesterday. She turned her head and looked at Yin Ruahui seriously through the delicate pattern on the window lattice. When he was recalling the memory just now, his eyes were full of warmth. But when he said she is dead, his expression was very complicated. There was regret, remorse, and even resentment. It wasn't towards others, but towards her. After more than half an hour, the rain finally stopped. A shallow rainbow hung in the sky, and the sun also drilled through the clouds. The whole capital was bustling with people coming and going as usual. Not long after, Forsythia and Huimo came back from outside. Lian Xiao said, "I have found the leader of the troop." She said that 2 years ago, it was indeed the third prince's residence who bought the entire troop. After that, she did not have any contact with the girls in the troop. Huimo said, "The Ministry of Revenue said that they checked the records of the year before last. They didn't receive any note from Prince Ke. The Jingji government also asked, but they didn't find it either." Ningxu frowned. Then how did she know that the person she was looking for was dead? It was futile to think about this now, so Ningxu put it aside and said, "Brother Huimo, I'll have to trouble you to check on Yunfei's current condition later. As for the Phoenix Terrace that your master mentioned, let's go after nightfall." Okay. Yinruahue's robe was wet. After feeding the medicine, he went to change his clothes. While no one was paying attention, Huimo immediately pulled up his troublesome skirt and knelt in front of Cloudleaf's bed, and began to feel his pulse. First he lifted his eyelids, observed his lips and tongue, and then took out a silver needle and pricked his fingertip. He said with certainty, "His eyes are cloudy, his tongue is green and sluggish. His vision and taste senses are damaged." After pricking his fingertip, he did not move at all. Only after a while did he have a weak reaction. His sense of touch is slow. As for his sense of smell and hearing, he is unconscious. He pressed his hand on Cloudleaf's internal organs. But his internal organs are damaged. His meridians are blocked. It's similar to my master's, but it's more serious. He vomits blood frequently. Is it because his body is weak? Finally, he pulled open Cloudleaf's lapel and carefully looked at Cloudleaf's neck. The shape, color, and position of the 4 plum blossoms are exactly the same as the one on my master's neck. It should be the kiss of the plum blossoms. His condition is stable, but I'm afraid it's too late to save him. Ningxu immediately flattered him and smiled. "Brother Huimo, you're really good at both the pen and the sword. You're very skillful." Huimo was very proud. "You haven't seen my master. He's omnipotent. My autopsy, Xian's sharpness, Tianwen's 10 lines at a glance, Jussi's strategy, and so on were all taught by him. Compared with my master, my insignificant skills are not enough. If it weren't for..." Ningxu guessed the second half of his sentence should be, "If it weren't for last year, his eyes would no longer be able to see." He had long expected that he would gradually lose his 5 senses in the future. It was as if his hands were broken and his eyes were blind. So he planned in advance. He dismantled all his talents one by one and taught the people around him. He let them be his eyes, his brain, his elbows, and even the knife to dissect himself after he died. Someone tried to control his life with poison, so he worked hard to take back the control from the other party. Such a temperament, such tenacity. From being complete strangers to seeing him for the first time, Ningxu expressed her heartfelt respect for that man. It's just, she reached out and touched her neck, which was still painful. She was very resentful. He was too cruel and merciless. Poor her delicate skin. Tomorrow there will be a big bruise. Huimo finished the autopsy and was about to put the Cloudleaf back to its original state. Suddenly he saw Cloudleaf's hair. He was surprised in his heart and pushed Cloudleaf's hair aside. Suddenly, he caught a few very small red dots at the root of Cloudleaf's hair. He wondered, "What's this?" When he was about to take a closer look, he suddenly heard the housekeeper of the House of Yun rushing in to report. "It's terrible. It's terrible. Lady Ning Feng, Phoenix Terrace Empress Zhou, has appeared." Chapter 71. 25 years ago, Phoenix Terrace was built with gold and jade. It cost millions of silver, not to mention the dendrobium pearls shipped from Donghai, the top spices, jade and jewelry from the western region, and various rare animals, stones and herbs from the 4 prefectures of 9 regions. Back then, the Phoenix stage was so glorious that it was like an intoxicating fairyland. But now, dusk was about to fall, and the last rays of light shone through the sky. When the last trace of afterglow shone, the immortals would hold flowers, and the sun and moon would replace each other. Ningxu stepped on the dark slate and looked at the crumbling ruins in front of her. It was as if she had entered a huge and barren tomb, and every corner seemed to be hiding ghosts. It had just rained, and everything was wet. The tip of her nose seemed to smell the thick smoke of the monstrous fire decades ago. I really saw it. It's her. Empress Zhou really came back. Her ghost was floating in the air just now. Thousands of people knelt in front of Phoenix Terrace and kowtowed in panic. The leader of the elders pointed at the charred ruins in front of him with a trembling hand. Empress Zhou came back for revenge. The capital city is going to be finished, and the world is going to be in chaos. Yes, 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 we all saw it. Everyone is going to be finished. The crowd burst into sobs of fear. Standing outside the crowd, Huemo couldn't help but frown and whisper, "One person may be lying, but hundreds of people saw it. It doesn't look fake." Ningxu raised her head and quietly looked at the buildings that were currently charred. From left to right, from the flower washing pavilion that had been burned to the point where only its frame was left, to the towering Zhaixing Lu, and then to the Phoenix stage hidden behind the eerie shadow of the trees. His Majesty and Her Majesty are here. With a long shout, hundreds of Yang Chengwei came with swords and dispersed the crying crowd. "Get out of the way! Keep quiet! Kneel down to welcome him." They didn't expect that the news would attract His Majesty. Ningxu and Huemo followed the crowd and knelt down. Wearing a bright yellow dragon robe, the Emperor and the Empress walked out of the Dragon and Phoenix carriage with a cold expression. The Emperor was close to 50 years old. In the past few years, there had been news that he was ill, but the majesty of the Emperor for many years still made him look dignified, especially at this moment. We will see where the vengeful spirit is. He pushed away the Empress's support and personally walked into the abandoned garden. He scanned the surroundings. Where are the ghosts? Where are the ghosts? Do you have the ability to appear in front of me? Under the escort of the guards, he walked around but did not see a single shadow. A mocking expression appeared on the Emperor's face. He looked at the charred Phoenix Terrace, and then at the terrified people kneeling on the ground. The flesh at the corner of his mouth trembled. He said coldly and angrily, "Today I am here. Whoever dares to make irresponsible remarks and sneak around will be killed without mercy." The commoners all closed their mouths tightly in fear, no longer daring to use strange means to protect their heads. But just as the Emperor finished speaking, a commoner in the crowd suddenly pointed and said, It's here again. It's there." Ningxu's gaze immediately followed the direction he was pointing at. Indeed, she saw that in front of the charred Phoenix stage, there was a faint ghostly figure floating in the void. She couldn't see the figure's face clearly, but it really did seem to be wearing a phoenix robe, especially the phoenix robe with thousands of tassels made of pearls at the end. It was extremely beautiful. At this moment, even Ningxu was shocked by this scene. Her pupils suddenly shrank. The elder who had been crying immediately fell to the ground. "It really is Empress Zhou. I saw her when Phoenix Terrace was completed. At that time, she was wearing that phoenix robe with tassels." With a shout, tens of thousands of people wailed. Everyone began to panic. "Your Majesty!" the Empress suddenly cried out. The surrounding eunuchs and guards immediately put the Emperor into the dragon carriage to send him back to the palace. The other guards all rushed to catch the female ghost. The sky quickly darkened. The ghost figure floated and scattered. As if it had sensed the people who came to catch her, it also quickly disappeared. The Empress stood in place. She narrowed her strict phoenix eyes and searched the crowd. She shouted, "Where is Ningxu?" Ningxu, who was called out, wailed in her heart. She braced herself and walked through the crowd to kneel in front of the Empress. She heard the Empress bend down and angrily whisper in her ear, "I don't accept that ghosts are causing trouble. There must be someone who is causing trouble to my court. If you can't get to the bottom of this matter, then you will be the murderer of this case. Do you hear me?" With a numb scalp, Ningxu bowed her head and replied, "My daughter understands." Chapter 72. 10 days later, the Golden Buddha will come to the capital. If you haven't solved the case by then, you can only use your blood as the first gift to welcome the Golden Buddha. After saying this, the Empress went back to the palace under the escort of the palace maids and bodyguards. The thousands of Dragon City guards who had received the order to disperse the crowd. Everyone was ordered not to talk nonsense, but if a drop of cold water was poured into a pot of oil, how could such a big movement be covered up? The news would be spread all over the capital tonight. You are so unlucky. Guillermo looked at her with a pitiful gaze. You have the reputation of being a jinx to the 9 clans. Now that such a thing has happened at Phoenix Stage, there is no one in the entire capital who is more suitable to take the blame than you. Ningxu touched her knee, which was painful because of kneeling, and didn't say anything. You took the blame yourself. TSK, TSK, TSK. You're so lucky. Guillermo crossed his arms and continued to mutter. He had been used to women's clothes these days. He had become immune to the 2 lumps on his chest. Sometimes he deliberately squeezed them more. Ningxu's mouth twitched. She squinted at him. Do you want to have dinner first? Why? Because you are going to do the autopsy later. Guillermo blinked and asked curiously, how do you know? Empress Zhou burned herself to death. In order to create the perfect scene of Empress Zhou's resurrection, there must be the same dead body. Ningxu shrugged and said, by the way, I remember there is a delicious meat pie nearby. You can get 2 if you buy it now. It will be sold out later. Guillermo thought for a moment, and felt that what she said was very reasonable. He quickly went to buy some meat pies and wrapped them in oil paper. When he was about to put them into his mouth, he heard the bodyguards who had been searching shouted, there is a dead body here. Is it little Empress Zhou? Guillermo opened his mouth and paused. Ningxu smiled and took the meat pies from his arms. She said, young hero, let's go. The sky was already dark. Yang Chengwei had lit up lanterns all over the place. The corpse was found at the highest point of Zhaixing Lu, which was beside Phoenix Terrace. Compared to Phoenix Terrace, which had been completely burned into ruins, Zhaixing Lu wasn't too badly damaged. However, the doors and windows had long rotted away, leaving the place empty and leaking air everywhere. As soon as Guillermo went upstairs, he stepped on the puddle beside the threshold. He quickly jumped over. Why is the puddle so serious? The guard who found the corpse said, perhaps it was the rain that came in this afternoon. Lady Ning, the body is over there. Actually, Ningxu had already discovered it without him saying anything. A charred corpse was hanging in the middle of this floor. A blood-red ribbon was wrapped around the corpse's neck, and the other end of the corpse was hanging from the ceiling beam. The light from the lanterns shone on it, casting eerie shadows on the walls. The corpse was neatly dressed in the pearl phoenix robe that was rumored to be worth tens of thousands of gold. Guillermo said, wow, it's so expensive. Then he shook his head and said, oh, it's too tragic. Then he began to take off his clothes. Ningxu held her forehead and hurriedly sent the guards away. She leaned closer and whispered, don't forget that you are a girl now. Guillermo said without hesitation, what are you afraid of? I have several layers inside. Then he pulled out a few hairpins from his hair and took out a very sharp knife. Then he used the knife to cut open the interlayer of his clothes and took out a set of dissecting tools. He tore the clothes and quickly made a cloth to cover his mouth and nose. Then he dug in his chest and took out a few balls of raw garlic. Ningxu was shocked. You. Chapter 73. Guillermo takes a stone and starts to grind the garlic and soak it in the cloth. He says complacently, haha, how can I not take it with me? It took me 2 days to come up with this secret book. I won't teach it to anyone else. Isn't it smart? Ningxu wanted to say that he didn't mind the smell, but after thinking about it, she decided to keep her mouth shut. She took the gloves and the cloth towels soaked in garlic juice from his hands and put it on. She helped him carefully carry the corpse down and lay it flat on a platform without any water. The body has been dead for a long time. There is a dizzying smell coming from it. Guillermo goes to the door and takes a deep breath. He comes back and squats in front of the body. He says, excuse me. Then he starts to work. 6 feet 3 inches tall. She was not raped before she died. The cause of death is that she was stabbed in the heart. The knife went right through her heart. She didn't show any signs of struggle. Ningshu listens to him and analyzes. Did you find any traces of knockout drugs in her mouth, throat, or intestines? No. The murderer was either a very strong man who could control her without any resistance and then stab her to death, or he suddenly swung the knife when she was unprepared. The knife went right through her, indicating that it was very likely to be someone she knew, which was why she was so unguarded. Or it was the last one. Which one? The ghost of Empress Zhou enchanted her mind. Huiyemo trembles when he hears this. It was one thing for others to say, but he had seen it with his own eyes. The ghostly figure floating in the void was too real, and he couldn't help but believe it. He quickly shakes his head to shake the horrible scene out of his mind. He lowers his head to untie the phoenix robe on the body. The victim was burned after she died. Her face was burned the most. According to the weather and the decay of the body, she died less than a month ago. Her phoenix robe is intact, but there is a lot of dust on it. Judging from the marks on her neck, she was hung on the beam 2 days ago. Otherwise, her head would have been cut off. Ningshu looked around carefully and found that there were 4 relatively large puddles on this floor. She frowned and bent down to touch the corpse. She continued, the deceased should have been buried in the ground after death. These days, the murderer noticed that I was investigating this case, so he dug up the corpse and created the strange scene today. He completely blamed this case on Empress Zhou. Let's go out and check later. We should be able to find a piece of land that has just been turned over nearby. As for the fire after her death, it was probably because she didn't want others to find out her identity. Huimo's hands carefully touched the burnt flesh. Judging from the growth of the left palm, the phalanges, the wrist bones, the radius and the ulna bones, he should be around 18 or 19 years old, no more than 20 years old. His body is well proportioned. There are calluses on his fingers, but there are no calluses on his palms. I need to clean up the remaining flesh on my face and remodel it with clay. I should be able to recover about 70 to 80% of it. Ningshu. If there are no calluses on the palms, it means that they don't usually do heavy work. But if there are calluses on the fingertips, it's a characteristic of people who play the zither. She raises her head and looks from the high beam above her head to the broken half of the wall opposite the door. There used to be countless rare treasures here. They were either destroyed in the fire many years ago or stolen by the people who broke in later. Now the walls here are empty except for the grayish-yellow wall in the south. The mural of immortals descending to the earth with stars in their hands is broken and withered. Only half of the wall is left, which is particularly desolate. After looking at it, she goes back to Huiyemo and squats down. Please open her throat and check if there are any calluses or polyps on her vocal cords. Chapter 74. Ningshu helped him to stabilize the neck of the corpse. Then Huiyemo cut the middle of the throat. Although the face of the corpse was badly burned, the throat was deep. Except for the inevitable decay, it was still well preserved. After a while Huiyemo nodded. There are calluses. Ningshu pondered for a moment and showed pity in her eyes. It means that she used her voice too much for a long time and didn't take good care of it. She should be a singer in a brothel. In addition to practicing her voice every day, she also needs to practice some simple instruments. You have to reconstruct the face. But according to the current situation, I think she is the one we have been looking for. Nainu. After listening, Huiyemo looked at the corpse in front of him, and his eyes were slightly stunned. They had spent so much effort to find the person who took the initiative to appear in front of them. This feeling was really unpleasant. Although according to their analysis, since the murderer dared to openly display the corpse in front of them, he would definitely not leave any clues. However, the two of them still worked tirelessly to dissect and analyze the corpse thoroughly. The result was that they found nothing. When they came out of Zhaixing Lu, Huiyemo hurriedly took off the gloves that were stained with rotten meat. He looked up at the moon and felt dizzy, depressed and hungry. The tip of his nose sniffed and suddenly smelled the fragrance of the food beside him. He looked and saw Ningshu taking out the oiled paper bag that contained the meat patty, and was eating heartily. Just as he was about to ask for a piece, he suddenly noticed that there was a piece of meat in the middle of the meat patty that was bitten. He could see that the shop was very serious when making the pies. Every piece of meat was finely chopped and mixed together with a secret sauce. Even if it was cold, he could still smell the tempting fragrance. But when he thought of the burnt and rotten meat on the corpse, Guimo's stomach suddenly turned. Just now you and I examined the corpse together. How can you still eat it? You are simply. Although he had examined many corpses and had seen blood on his hands, he had never eaten in front of a corpse. Even when Shitsi taught him how to dissect corpses in the prince's mansion, he just distinguished the bones while Shitsi drank tea. He had never eaten anything. This woman was too terrifying. Ningshu took a step forward and put a piece of meat pie in front of him. What's wrong with this? If they really forced someone into a corner, there would be people who would eat them up. Didn't you say you were hungry before the autopsy? Here, I'll give you a piece. I wrapped it quite tightly and it's still warm. It's especially fragrant. Hurry up and have a taste. I'll leave. Me. Far. Be careful. Looking at Guillermo running away, Ningshu smiles evilly. Young man, you have to pay the price for mocking others. Have you learned that? She finished eating the meat loaf and was about to clap her hands and step out of the gate of this desolate garden, when she suddenly felt a slight wind rushing towards the back of her head. She lowered her head and 3 darts pierced into the tree trunk in front of her. She didn't have time to react before another 3 followed. Ningshu sucked in a breath. Just when the 3 darts were about to pierce through Ningshu's chest, Guillermo flew quickly and threw out the last piece of garlic that he didn't use just now. Then his body was like a whirlwind in front of Ningshu. 3 darts, 1 was hit by the garlic in his chest, 1 was kicked away by his foot, and the last one was caught between his teeth. Guillermo kneeled on the ground with 1 knee, tilted his head and spat out the dart that he caught with his teeth. A crisp sound. There was a rustling sound in the dark shadow of the tree in the distance. When Guillermo rushed over, the other party had already escaped. Picking up the darts on the ground and placing them in her palm, Ningshu narrowed her eyes and said, "Looks like we have to be faster." Chapter 75. On Phoenix Terrace, the ghost of Empress Zhou appeared in front of His Majesty. On the top floor of Zhaixinglu, a charred corpse in a phoenix robe appeared. These 2 pieces of news spread throughout the capital overnight. An oppressive and fearful atmosphere pervaded the capital. Even the number of people on the streets had decreased significantly. Children were locked up at home, afraid that they would run around and be possessed by resentful ghosts, becoming the second corpse to be hung on Zhaixinglu. Buddhist temples and Taoist temples in the capital were crowded with people. They were all fighting to buy willow water, charms, and other items to ward off evil spirits. Even Bai Xiaosheng, who had always been a joker in Chasing Cloud and Chasing Moon Tower, became serious because of the female ghost. The name I didn't dare to say that day was Empress Zhou. I didn't expect that the more I didn't dare to say, the more it would happen. I heard the news from the palace that the Golden Buddha would enter the capital in 9 days. His Majesty was going to welcome the Golden Buddha into Wanfo Temple, and let the light of the Golden Buddha shine on the entire capital from Mount Xiang. But this plan was disrupted by the sudden appearance of Empress Zhou's resentful ghost. His Majesty has now decided to suppress the Golden Buddha on Phoenix Terrace to disperse the resentful ghost. Will Consort Nguyen participate? Of course. I really hope that Consort Nguyen, the reincarnation of Guanyin, can use her Buddha's light to suppress the ghost in Phoenix Terrace. Don't let the female ghost run out and kill people again. Did you see the ghost yesterday? I saw it. My house is nearby. It's too scary. I didn't see it when it first appeared. When I heard that His Majesty went, I ran to see it. I saw with my own eyes that His Majesty had just said, "I'm here today. Whoever dares to talk nonsense and do evil will be killed without mercy." It didn't take long for the female ghost to appear and float in the air. Thousands of pairs of eyes saw her. She was wearing a phoenix robe that was burnt black. I could faintly hear the ghost's cry. Even His Majesty fainted from fright. Ever since that ghost shadow appeared, our group of people moved out overnight. Now we are all staying at our relatives' houses. I don't know if we can escape this disaster. Could the charred corpse in the phoenix robe be Empress Zhou's punishment for us for not believing in her? I'm afraid this year won't be a peaceful one. May the gods and Buddhas bless us, may the heavens bless us. After leaving Chasing Cloud and Moon Chasing Pavilion, Ningxu sat in Xiaoqing's carriage, slowly traveling through the bustling eastern market. Ningxu lifted a corner of the curtain and looked outside. Only half of the stalls that had filled the entire street were left, and the crowd that had stood shoulder to shoulder had also disappeared. There were only a few people in front of the magic booth. The booth owner didn't get any reward for performing a few magic tricks, so he sat on the side in frustration. Ningxu looked for a while and asked Jussi to stop the carriage. She put on her veiled hat and jumped down from the carriage. She walked to the stall owner and said, "Stall owner, I saw you perform a few magic tricks when I passed by your shop earlier, especially that empty cage of birds. I saw with my own eyes that your cage was empty. When you covered it with a black cloth and blew on it with fairy air, several birds came out of it. It was really amazing. I went back and pondered for a long time, but I still couldn't figure it out. I scratched my ears and cheeks for several days. I just want to ask you what the secret of this magic trick is." The booth owner smiled and said, "This is the craft passed down from my master. If I tell you, I can only eat the northwest wind." Ningxu laughed, clear and carefree, like a delicate young lady raised in a boudoir. She was incomparably innocent. "Booth owner, don't worry. I won't steal your bowl of rice. I'm just satisfying my curiosity and going back to play by myself. If you can tell me, I'll pay you well." Chapter 76. The stall owner saw that she was dressed luxuriously and didn't seem like someone who was secretly learning from others. He also saw the small ingot of gold in her palm and immediately smiled. Actually, this magic trick is also difficult. It requires a long time of practice and refinement before it can become vivid and not be seen through. It's not difficult, but it's not difficult either. It's just a trick and a clever idea. Let's take the empty cage as an example. Actually, this cage was specially made. There was another layer below, and in the middle, there was a small mechanism. When I covered the cage with the black cloth, my hand took the opportunity to press the mechanism, and the few birds that were hiding in the lower layer came up. When I removed the black cloth, wouldn't the trick be completed? My mechanism is very secretive, and the audience won't come close to look. Naturally, they won't find anything. So that's how it is. What a clever idea. So the so-called magic tricks and illusions are nothing more than this. It's a success if you deceive people's eyes, right? Ningxu clapped her hands and praised. Haha, yes. Miss is really smart. Ningxu smiled sweetly and said, "Stall owner, my grandmother is celebrating her birthday next month. She also likes magic tricks very much. Can you teach me a few more tricks so that I can make her happy during the birthday banquet?" After receiving the ingot of gold, the stall owner was very enthusiastic. "Tell me what kind of magic trick you want to learn. Can you make flowers out of paper or flying peaches? I can also teach you the spirit monkey birthday banquet." Ningxu said crisply. She is a follower of Guanyin goddess. "I want to make a Guanyin goddess's image in the air. Do you have any good ideas?" "In the air?" "Yes." The stall owner showed a bitter smile. "If I know what you want, I don't need to set up a stall here. I can just go to a Buddhist temple and become a senior monk. You are making it too difficult for me. Even my ancestor didn't have this ability." Ningxu didn't have much hope. She thanked the stall owner and turned to get into the carriage. She shook her head at Xiaoqing and said, "I didn't get anything out of him." She picked up a cup of tea and moistened her throat. Her smile was slightly bitter. "From last night until this morning, 3,000 Yongchengwei have searched the entire Phoenix Terrace, but they couldn't find the mystery behind the appearance of the ghost shadow. Even if it was really a magic trick, it was too seamless and difficult to understand. Based on the current situation, Empress Zhou's ghost is probably the most plausible explanation." In front of her, Xiaoqing slowly ground the bones in his palm and leisurely said, "When I was 10 years old, my first plum blossom petal grew on the side of my neck. Father was furious and personally investigated the entire prince's mansion 3 times. He didn't find any problems. In the end, he beat my 8 closest bodyguards to death one by one. The remaining 86 people in my courtyard were all replaced, but he still couldn't prevent the second plum blossom petal from growing on the side of my neck when I was 17 years old. So far, I don't know how many batches of bodyguards have been replaced, but they still couldn't find the person who poisoned me. Even my father, after being mentally and physically exhausted, muttered to himself, "Is there really a ghost in this world that can come and go without a trace? That's why this matter can be done so flawlessly." He sneered and asked, "Do you think I believe it?" Ningshu slowly shook her head and answered, "No. If he believed it, he wouldn't drag his sick body to the capital and wouldn't be standing in front of her at this moment. He also wouldn't spend so much effort to train Huiyemo, Shiyan, and the others to be his eyes, mouth, hands, and brain, his left and right arms. He also wouldn't pin his hopes on a complete stranger like her and waste time with her." Xiaoqing's knuckles knocked on the small table. "Last night, someone wanted to kill you. I think this is good news." "Yes." Ningshu also agreed. Chapter 77. Outside the carriage, Huiyemo, who was walking slowly with the carriage, frowned in confusion. How could an assassination be a good thing? Last night, if he or Lady Ning didn't react in time, Lady Ning would have died in Phoenix Terrace. He continued to listen while looking around vigilantly. Ningshu's voice was soft and firm. "Originally, the other party made Empress Zhou's ghost appear in front of thousands of people yesterday. It was a very good move. When I saw that scene, even I was stunned. This move was simply wonderful. But his mistake was that he didn't restrain himself and took the opportunity to kill me. Instead, he revealed a flaw. This means that I have been investigating Ninu's matter and dissecting Ninu's body, which made him feel threatened. It also made me start to suspect. I always thought that the center of this case was Cloud Leaf. Maybe I was wrong. Ninu is the most important part, and Cloud Leaf was only poisoned because he accidentally saw the process of her death." Xiaoqing was silent for a moment, apparently thinking about her words. "How many suspects do you have?" Ningshu slowly said, "At present, there are 2 things that can be confirmed. First, Ninu and Yunruahui must have a deep and confidential relationship. Yesterday when he said in the nightmare, 'Don't blame me, you shouldn't have come, Nian,' the word after that should be the word slave. There is also the small portrait in his sleeve to prove it. Second, the opera troupe that Ninu was in 2 years ago was bought by the 3rd prince Xiao Yunyan. After that, more than a dozen girls in the troupe didn't have any contact with the troupe leader. What happened to those girls is worth investigating." Xiaoqing nodded and said in a clear voice, "Investigate it as soon as possible. I hope you won't waste the life that I saved you before." Ningshu also had the same idea. The morning bell of the 7th day had already rung. Whether it was the time she promised Madame Yin, or the time to meet the Golden Buddha, there were less than 9 days left. Following their analysis, the carriage soon stopped in front of the Namping mansion. Ningshu put on her veiled hat and followed him into the mansion. This time, the treatment was much better than last time. Xiaoqing magnanimously sent Jiuxi and Huiyemo to help her move all the files in the 3rd prince's residence and read them together with her. Jiuxi is worthy of being taught by Xiaoqing to read 10 lines at a glance. He flips through the files very fast. Ningshu is not much slower than him. Soon, the files they have read are piled up in front of them. Only Huiyemo begins to feel dizzy after flipping through a few books. Shouldn't investigating a case be something cool and heroic? I watched the great detectives in the drama. As soon as they appeared on the scene, their eyes would sweep around the crime scene a few times. Then they would pinch their fingers and immediately pinch the murderer. Why do we keep drowning in all kinds of files and files? Ningshu's eyes continued to work. She diverted some of her attention to him and comforted him with a smile. That's why it's just a drama. Most of the solving process of a case requires a lot of time to search for clues. This process is destined to be boring. Especially the older the case, the harder it is to find clues. This is even more important. In this dynasty, The princes can leave the palace and open a mansion after they are crowned at the age of 15. The files in the third prince's residence are only 5 years old. It's not a long time. Be patient. Guillermo let out a depressed sigh and then calmed down. The hall quickly returned to silence. Except for the sound of several people flipping through the books, there was only the sound of Xia Hoqing's fingertips playing chess. Ningxu watched from 7 in the morning until noon. When she was tired, she raised her head and twisted her sore neck. Then, she looked at Xia Hoqing, who was sitting under the window. The bright light outside the window jumped in through the window lattice and quietly went through the bead curtain. It fell on his face and clearly reflected the curve of his side profile on the wall. In front of him was a white jade chessboard. There were 19 horizontal and vertical lines on the chessboard. There were 361 intersection points. He held white in his left hand and black in his right hand. He placed chess pieces one by one on the chessboard without any delay. Ningxu was amazed and blinked her eyes. Then, she looked at Guillermo and Jiuxi, who were quite calm. It seemed that this scene was rare and ordinary. She thought for a while and guessed that Xia Hoqing was born with an amazing memory. Remembering the layout of the chessboard was just a small matter. Even if God's favored son was blind, he would never allow himself to be disabled. This man was really respectable and scary. Ningxu thought about her neck. It was still hateful. Chapter 78. After cursing in her heart, Ningxu continued with what she was doing. The three of them worked together, so they saved a lot of time. After a simple lunch, they filtered out all the files related to the girls in the opera troupe. In 2 years out of the 24 girls, 15 died. When the results came out, Guillermo frowned in confusion. How could so many die? He checked again. The time of death was Heaven's Choice Year 23, November 11th, Heaven's Choice Year 24, January 6th, Heaven's Choice Year 24, April 2nd, and so on. Except for the high death rate, he couldn't find any pattern. It felt like an accident. Ningxu frowned slightly. Her eyes fell on these files for a long time. Then she pursed her lips and said, I'll have to trouble you two to find me the files of the death records of the maids in the third prince's mansion. I don't need all of them. Just find some for me. The two nodded and said, yes. They didn't have time to rest and continued to work. Just now, they flipped through the files and had some impressions. Soon they gathered a pile of files. Ningxu's calm gaze swept past the densely packed words. Her eyes quickly lit up as she read out a few lines. Look here, on the 27th day of the 10th month of the 23rd year of Heaven's selection, Maid Chui Lian passed away due to illness. November 11th, year 23, Qin Fong accidentally fell into the water and died. November 24th, year 23, Maid Xiao Yu died of an epidemic disease. December 8th, year 23, Guillermo was still puzzled, but Jiuxi had already seen through the mystery. Since 3 years ago, every 13 or 14 days, there will be a maid in the third prince's mansion who died of illness or accidents. Ningxu nodded. The third prince's residence is so big. There are hundreds of servants who serve him. Every year, a dozen or 20 of them die in various accidents. It's not a lot. If they commit a big crime, the master will kill dozens of them in a fit of anger. However, the problem is that the time of death is basically 14 days. Among them, it cleverly avoids important days such as His Majesty's birthday and the Empress Dowager's Memorial Day. This can't be described as mere coincidence. She was so thirsty that she picked up a cup of water from the table and drank it. She continued, in addition, the death rate of the maids is especially high. I compared the death rate of the maids and the male servants in the same period of time. 7 maids died, but only 2 servants died. One of them was even older. Just from these data, we can see that the third prince's residence is full of mysteries. Xia Hoqing threw the unfinished chess piece into the jar and said slowly, if too many people die at once, it will inevitably attract unnecessary attention and some speculations. So he arranged a reasonable cause of death for everyone in advance, as well as the time of death. Guillermo finally understood the mystery of the date and asked, but even if he arranged the time in advance, What if too many people died at once? Stay in the mansion and let it stink? Ningxu shook her head and said, "Don't forget, it is the third prince's mansion. There must be an ice cellar. After people die, they will be pulled into the ice cellar. After a few days, it is not difficult to move them out of the ice cellar and bury them. Moreover, before people die, he can send them out of the mansion in advance with some excuse. After a few days, he can report to the Ministry of Revenue. After people die, they will be buried in the soil. In the end, who will know who died and when they died? Even if the relatives of individual maids raise doubts, the people who can sell their daughters once will naturally sell them a second time for gold and silver. Many women from poor families, if they can be chosen to work in the third prince's mansion, they should burn incense. But who knows that the magnificent palace is actually a demon's den that eats people? Just thinking about it made people feel cold all over." Chapter 79. Her throat was already uncomfortable, and after speaking so much, the young girl's sweet voice sounded a bit hoarse, making people who heard it feel thirsty. Xiahou Qing reached out to pick up the cup of tea that he had just placed on the table, but he suddenly discovered that the cup had moved and the water inside was empty. He slightly wrinkled his brows and pressed his thumb on the cup, his face unnatural for a moment. But that unnaturalness came and went quickly. He calmly moved the cup to the side and said in a low voice, "When will the next damned person from the third prince's residence be?" Ningxu calculated in her mind and said, "It should be within these 2 days. In these few days, I will arrange for people to take turns guarding outside the third prince's residence to see if they can catch any clues. However, I am afraid that the matter of Phoenix Terrace will be exposed, so the third prince's residence will be temporarily restrained. Then it will all depend on luck." Xiahou Qing said, "You said before that before Ninu disappeared, she left her family's heirloom bracelet with the procuress. If we put some effort into it, we might be able to find some clues." Ningxu nodded. "I also have the same idea. Moreover, Chen Yangyang asked me before, so I should give her an explanation." After putting on her veiled hat, Ningxu took Hui Mo and left, preparing to go to the moon-seizing lake again. "Wait!" The voice of the person behind her interrupted her movement to leave. Ningxu looked back at him in surprise, thinking that he still had something to say. But she saw that he suddenly threw a small jade-colored porcelain box in his palm. She caught it, and Xiahou Qing seemed to be calm as he said, "This is an ointment to promote blood circulation and disperse blood stasis. Take it and use it." She touched the porcelain box in her palm. It wasn't too cold, and it seemed to still have the residual warmth of his palm. Ningxu raised her eyebrows and said with a smile, "Is this an apology from your highness for strangling my neck yesterday?" "Heh, it was rare for the cold as ice his highness to feel guilty." Xiahou Qing pursed his lips, and seemed to feel that the air in the hall was a little stagnant. He stretched out his finger, and lifted a corner of the bead curtain. He frowned and said coldly to the window, "You're thinking too much. I just feel that your voice is not as strong as before. It's hard to listen to you." Ningxu couldn't help but sneer. After Ningxu left, Xiahou Qing sat silently in front of the table under the window. The begonia outside the window bloomed just right. A pink and white petal quietly crept in, and floated to the side of his hand. It was like a light kiss, but also like the foot of a dragonfly brushing across the surface of a lake, creating a ripple. A moment later, Xiahou Qing said, "Jussi, take this tea set out and smash it." Jussi was stunned for a moment. His eyes fell on the tea set. He suddenly realized what had happened and immediately said, "Yes." Then he stepped forward, tidied up the tea set, and turned around to take it out. He raised his hand, and was about to smash the first cup. But he heard His Highness's voice again, "Wait." Through the window, Jussi felt that His Highness's calm voice seemed to be mixed with a trace of irritation. "Put it away. Don't let me see it again." He looked down at his nose at his mouth, and his mouth at his heart. He didn't interrupt and respectfully replied, "Yes." After leaving the Namping mansion, they got on their own carriage. Hui Mo drove the carriage to the west of the city. Ningxu leaned on the soft cushion to rest for a while. While she was half asleep, the carriage suddenly stopped. Ningxu was caught off guard and woke up. She was about to ask what happened. Huiyemo lifted a corner of the curtain and whispered, "It seems to be the fifth princess's carriage." As soon as he finished speaking, a mama came over. "Is it the eldest miss of the Ning family? Our princess invites you." The fifth princess? She didn't remember having any dealings with this princess. She thought it was because of the case. Ningxu rubbed her swollen temples and put on a model smile to get off the carriage to greet her. Chapter 80. Fifth Princess Xiao Changyue was the eldest daughter of His Majesty. In His Majesty's eyes, her position was different from the other princesses. Since she was young, she didn't like female toys. Instead, she often practiced horseback riding and archery with the princes. Her personality was straightforward, so she was deeply favored by His Majesty. Among the princesses of His Majesty, she was the only one who was allowed to leave the palace frequently. Her carriage was very luxurious and spacious. It was enough to seat 7 or 8 people. Just the luxurious decorations on the inside of the carriage were expensive. His Majesty's favor was evident. Although she wasn't particularly beautiful, there was a heroic spirit in her brows that ordinary women didn't have. "I heard that Muhu gave the case to you. What have you found out?" Ningxu bowed her head and said, "Reporting to Princess, Ningxu is still investigating and hasn't found anything." Xiao Zhangyue sighed. "Sai, I really hope that this is all man-made and not real. To tell you the truth, ever since I saw the ghost with my own eyes yesterday, Imperial Father's head disease acted up again. He couldn't sleep the whole night, and didn't even attend the morning court today. It was only when Consort Ruan went to accompany and take care of him that Fu Huang felt better. Right now, not to mention Jing City, even in the palace there are some people who are anxious. Recently, I often feel uneasy. I'm either sleepy or restless. I keep feeling that something bad is about to happen." Ningxu said, "Princess, please take care of your jade body. Ningxu will do her best to get to the bottom of this matter as soon as possible." "Then I'll have to trouble you." Xiao Changyue nodded. Then she looked at the decorations in the carriage and was lost in thought. After a while she said, "How has he been recently?" Thoughts turned in her mind. Ningxu understood who he was referring to. She said, "De Gongzi has been taking care of the cloud leaf. He doesn't wear clothes and his fatigue has decreased. However, it's not a big problem." "That's good," Xiao Changyue nodded. Then she looked at her and smiled self-deprecatingly. "You've also heard about me?" This question was not easy to answer. Ningxu could only vaguely reply, "I've heard a little about it." Xiao Changyue said indifferently, "I know that many people outside laugh at me. Even among my brothers and sisters, there are some who talk behind my back. In the entire harem, there are only 2 or 3 people who are willing to understand me. What's wrong with that? I love him with all my heart, so I'm willing to do stupid things for him. It's my own pleasure." On this point, Ningxu sincerely admired her. Princess is bold and straightforward, not influenced by the secular world's views. Ningxu admires you. Xiao Changyue held her hand and said, "Ningxu, you and I are both women with bad reputations. Although today is the first time I've seen you, there are many things I want to say to you. Tell me, love at first sight or love over time, which one is easier to have a good ending?" Ningxu thought of her own experience of 7 lives. She believed that she was inferior in the matter of love, so she smiled bitterly and said, "No matter if it is love at first sight or love over time, it all depends on the fate of the 2 people. Some people love at first sight as fiercely as their passion fades. After calming down and looking at it again, the past feelings are nothing more than chicken feathers on the ground. There are also people who have been stubbornly holding on for their entire lives, hoping for love over time. In the end, they just treat each other with respect, and even have nothing to say to each other. There are even people who go from their partners to their enemies, fighting to stab the other in the weakest spot." Forgive Ningxu for being slow-witted and unable to give Princess an answer. She can only think of a sentence my mother taught me. Don't force anything. Following her words, Xiao Zhangyue seemed to have thought of something and let out a cold laugh. The same arrogance of the Xiao family was undoubtedly revealed at this moment. Imperial father once told me that I am the imperial daughter, the girl with the best birth in the world. As long as I want something, I should get it. If I am not satisfied, then I will get rid of him. In the past, I always had misgivings about his thoughts. I didn't want to make him unhappy, so I endured and followed his wishes. But he would rather run off to like someone than like me. Sometimes I really can't accept this. Chapter 81. Ningxu looked up at her in surprise and found that Xiao Changyue's eyes were somewhat illusory. She muttered to herself, "Don't force anything. But what if I insist?" "Your Highness?" She realized that she had lost her composure and immediately changed the topic. "Are you going to the west of the city?" "Yes. Does your Highness have any orders?" Xiao Changyue casually waved her hand. "No, you can go do your own thing. I hope to hear the good news of you solving the case as soon as possible." This princess came inexplicably, said a lot of inexplicable words, and then left inexplicably. Ningxu suspiciously looked at the extravagant carriage. If she didn't hear it wrong, the fifth princess clearly knew who Yinruohue's sweetheart was. And her unwillingness and insistence, could it be? "Let's go to the moon-embracing lake first." Ningxu put aside her doubts and immediately boarded the carriage. Her eyelids twitched. She always felt that there was no time for such a short delay. Hui Mo immediately waved his whip. When they arrived at the moon-embracing lake, before the carriage had even stopped, Ningxu's eyes were already stung by the pungent smoke. She couldn't care less and immediately lifted the curtain and jumped down. In the next moment, a huge rock pressed down on her chest. Hundreds of people stood on the shore, lamenting around a burning pleasure boat. In the middle of the crowd, the procuress collapsed on the ground and cried loudly. Chun Yang and the others were also disheveled and dirty. Their faces were covered with black ash and their bodies were wet. It was obvious that they had just escaped from the pleasure boat. Some of the girls were even burned. All of them gathered together like frightened sparrows, crying and weeping. Pushing through the crowd, Ningxu hurriedly asked, "What's going on?" Chun Yang raised her head and recognized her. She tried her best to stop her tears and said, "We were all tidying up our rooms to prepare for the reception of the guests at night. Somehow the boat suddenly caught fire, and it wasn't just one place. The fire was so strong that we couldn't put it out even if we poured water on it. We had no choice but to jump into the lake to escape, but everything on the boat was gone." Ningxu's heart was heavy. She bent down and asked, "Do you still have the bracelet that Nainu pawned to Mama?" The procuress cried, "What damned bracelet? It's gone. There was nothing. Everything I had was burned down. My life's work." The girls next to her covered their wounds and cried, "It's not enough that Empress Zhou punished Nainu. How can she vent her anger on us?" On the surface of the lake, the pleasure boat let out a teeth-numbing sound. Like a giant beast that had died of old age, it slowly sank into the lake with flames that engulfed the sky. Other than the pungent smoke, there was nothing left. Looking at what happened in front of her, Ningxu pressed her lips tightly. The clues left behind by slave Nian were scarce, and now the last direct evidence had sunk to the bottom of the lake. They were still one step too late. How could it be so coincidental? Hui Mo's face was tightly wrinkled. If Fifth Princess hadn't stopped the carriage, we might have made it in time. Ningxu walked to the lakeside and fished out a floating piece of the deck from the water. She touched it and felt a piece of slippery oil between her fingers. She closed her eyes and went through the series of things that happened just now in her mind again. Then she said softly, "Yes, how could it be so coincidental?" After leaving all the money to Chun Yang and others temporarily, she returned to the residence of Yun. Ningxu immediately found Zigui. "Zigui, Forsythia is temporarily guarding the residence of Yun. I have another more important thing to ask you. Immediately go to Qingzhou and help me find the traces of a singer named Nainu in the brothel. I want all the information related to her. It's 1,000 miles away from Qingzhou, but I only have 8 days to give you. I'm afraid that you will have to travel day and night. Please take care of yourself." "It's my duty. I'll go now," Zigui shouted. A red horse quickly rushed out of the city gate, stepped on the grass pond that had accumulated rain yesterday, and rushed to the north of Qingzhou. Chapter 82. Eldest Master, do you believe in vengeful spirits? Ningxu sighed as she stood in front of Cloudleaf's bed. She suddenly turned to Yin Ruohui and asked. Yin Ruohui frowned and asked, Lady Ning, why do you suddenly ask? Do you also believe in the rumor that Empress Zhou took her anger out on Cloudleaf and harmed him? Ningxu smiled and shook her head. She pulled back her sleeves and cut off the extra leaves of a begonia. She inserted it into the flower pot beside Cloudleaf's bed. I've been troubled and unable to sleep for the past few days, so I casually flipped through Taiping Guangji. I was deeply moved when I read 2 stories. The first story was about Zheng Sheng, who was obsessed with love, who met Li Hua, who valued friendship and righteousness. The 2 of them eventually fell in love and stayed together for the rest of their lives. The second story was about Hua Xiaoyu, who was born of a concubine in the prince's residence. After her father's death, she became a geisha. Unfortunately, she met Li Yi, who was a hypocrite. After she was abandoned, her heart died and she became a vengeful spirit. In order to seek revenge, she wreaked havoc on Li Yi's life. Li Hua and Hua Xiaoyu were both born in the brothel, but their fates were completely different. How could anyone not sigh when they saw such a huge difference in their lives? That's why I asked just now. After arranging the flowers, she dipped her fingers in water and carefully sprinkled it on the petals. She turned to Yin Ruohui and asked, Eldest Master, why do you think these 2 women ended up like this? Yin Ruohui looked a little absent-minded. Probably because they met different people. Both of them were women who valued friendship and righteousness. It's just that some people are worth entrusting your life to, while others are not. Ningxu furrowed her brows in distress. Li Yi was a jinshi. In the beginning, he was also affectionate and sweet. Zheng Sheng, on the other hand, was extravagant and didn't take the imperial examinations. It was only later that he started studying. I really can't tell which one of them is worth entrusting your life to. Maybe it's hard to tell what's in a person's heart. Yin Ruohui's voice was a little obscure. Some people don't understand themselves. They think they are reliable, but in the end, they are just useless. Ningxu nodded her head in agreement. She tilted her head and asked curiously, What would you do if you met a woman like Li Hua or Hua Xiaoyu? Yin Ruohui gently lowered her eyes, using her long black eyelashes to cover up the bitterness in her eyes. She forced a smile and said, People are destined to have boundaries when they are born. Perhaps it was best not to meet people with too much disparity in status in the first place. Even if they did meet, they should not get close to them. It would be better for both parties. No one will disturb anyone, and no one will harm anyone. In the end, no one will hate anyone. Ningxu sighed. I remember what young Master Xiao told me before. The woman you were destined to meet unfortunately passed away. In your story, I think she was a very cute woman. My heart is in turmoil, so I would like to take the liberty to ask, why did she pass away, and when did she pass away? Yin Ruohui's body trembled slightly, and tears vaguely appeared in his eyes. She died 3 years ago. She died under a bandit's knife. Ningxu felt a stab in her heart when she saw this. She immediately bowed deeply and said, I'm sorry. It was my recklessness that brought up young Master Zhao's sad memories. Please forgive me. It's okay. It's all in the past. Yin Ruohui blinked away the tears in his eyes and said with a smile, I just need to remember that the best of her will always live in my heart. Forgive me for forgetting myself. I'll go clean up first. Yin Ruohui turned to leave, but Ningxu suddenly said, Young Master Xiao, there's something you might not know. About 2 hours ago, the 5th princess summoned me to ask about a case. Yin Ruohui suddenly stopped in his tracks. He turned around and asked, What did she ask you about? Chapter 83. She didn't ask anything and only talked for about 15 minutes before ordering me to leave. However, something very strange happened right after. I originally wanted to go to the moon-embracing lake to ask the procuress on the pleasure boat for a piece of evidence. But I was delayed by the 5th princess's question. By the time I arrived, the piece of evidence had already been burned into the lake along with the boat. Does eldest young master feel that this is strange? Ningshu looked up with a smile and carefully observed every inch of his expression. Yin Ruahui didn't even think. She definitely didn't do this. Without any hesitation. After he finished speaking, he realized that he was a bit agitated and arbitrary. He clenched his fists and then pretended to say unintentionally. What I mean is, it might just be a coincidence. Her Highness the Princess is noble. Why would she burn a pleasure boat for no reason? And if she did it, she didn't have to personally stop you. She could have sent people to cause trouble on the way. That way, no one would suspect her. I think so too. I'm afraid it's just a coincidence. Ningshu nodded with a smile and then shook her head. But the culprit is another unsolved case. Yin Ruahui was silent for a moment and didn't speak. Looking at his departing figure, Ningshu deeply frowned. She died 3 years ago. Then what was up with Nainu? Or did he deliberately say it to confuse her? This person was too complicated. He was like a combination of contradictions. The sweetness of the memories was real. The resentment when he talked about the death of his sweetheart was real. The anxiousness when he chased after her small portrait was real. Now when he talked about the regret when he shouldn't have met in the beginning, it was also real. And the fifth princess. His reaction at the time was too fast, completely out of instinct. It was as if he had already determined that it had nothing to do with the fifth princess. But how did he know? And the rumors said that he was heartless to the fifth princess. Why did he exonerate her? His person was exactly the same as the ink-colored landscape on the robe he was wearing today. It was so hazy that she couldn't see through him. After Yin Ruahui left, Forsythia reported the movements of the Yin residents in the past 2 days. Miss, I've been guarding here for the past few days. I've seen the eldest young master taking care of the cloud leaf with my own eyes. Young master is really doing his best. If this case was really done by him, then this person is too scary. He was a Buddha on one side and a demon on the other. Just thinking about it made one's hair stand on end. Ningshu said, the human heart is something that cannot be guessed. This time it is definitely related to him, but it is not necessarily his doing. You continue to guard here and inform me if there is anything unusual. Tonight, Huiyamo and I will go to the third prince's mansion to try our luck. As it turned out, her luck had not been very good recently. Ningshu waited outside the third prince's residence for 2 consecutive nights, but she didn't find anything. She didn't go to bed until it was almost dawn. Not long after, she was awakened by the sound of someone knocking on the door. Ningshu angrily lifted the quilt. She heard Huiyamo outside the door. My Shitsi invites you. He is outside the mansion. She opened her sore eyes with difficulty and sighed. She forced herself to get up from the bed. Xiaoqing sat in the carriage and said elegantly, wait for me at the 7-mile bridge in the evening. For what? Ningshu just asked and quickly realized which mansion was not far from the 7-mile bridge. Her eyes lit up. The third prince's mansion? Xiaoqing nodded slightly. It is not convenient for you to go in and find clues by yourself. I will take you in. Remember to dress up before you come. Then what identity should I dress up as? Bodyguard. Xiaoqing raised the corner of his mouth and showed an expression that was not a smile. Obviously, he meant you think too highly of yourself with your height. Then, under Ningshu's gloomy expression, he slowly said 3 words. Little eunuch. Ningshu. Chapter 84. It was better to be a little eunuch than not being able to get in. Thinking of this, Ningshu accepted the idea without any qualms. Fortunately, Ningshu was not short. After wrapping the chest cloth and changing into the eunuch's uniform, she looked tall and straight. She was even taller than some of the eunuchs. Huiyamo was an expert in disguise. He had a complete set of tools in his hands. He put on a pair of silk gloves and carefully kneaded Ningshu's face. He tried to only put a thin layer of rouge on the necessary parts to make her more androgynous. But even so, Ningshu frowned in pain. Ouch! It turns out that the disguise technique is so painful. Then the pain when you shrink your bones should be 100 times more painful. Huiyamo didn't care too much. He continued to press on her face to make some minor adjustments. He also applied some yellow powder to make her skin darker. It was the final cover. It's okay. It's just for a while. It's nothing. When I was a child, I was sent to the sect to practice martial arts. It was so miserable. Every day, my bones were like being broken and reshaped. I cried every day and was laughed at by my master and senior brothers. But no matter how painful it is, it's just physical pain. It can't be compared with Shitsi's. Ning Shu heard that he became depressed in the last sentence, so she said, "You are very loyal to your Shitsi." Huiyemo nodded hard and said, "That's right. If it weren't for Shitsi, I would have been eaten up by wild dogs." Why did it sound so miserable to be eaten by wild dogs? Ning Shu asked in confusion. Then what happened? Lady Ning, do you know about the famine in Hanjiang Prefecture 10 years ago? Ning Shu thought for a while and said, I have some impression. Hanjiang Prefecture was hit by a 100-year flood the year before, and then there was a drought the next year. All the newly planted rice died in the drought. Millions of hectares of farmland had no harvest. It is said that nearly 100,000 people died at that time. Huiyemo shook his head and said, No, in fact, it was a total of 280,000 people. My father and mother were also there. They all starved to death in that famine. Upon hearing this, Ning Shu frowned. It seemed that both the provincial government and the Ministry of Revenue had concealed the information. However, she did not expect them to be so bold as to conceal nearly 2/3 of the information. How audacious! Then Huiyemo continued to speak. Before he died, my father cut off a piece of meat from his body and gave it to me. He told me that it was a rabbit meat he picked up on the road and wanted me to eat it to survive. Huiyemo smiled. But I'm small, but my eyes are sharp. At that time, not to mention rabbit meat, even the grass on the ground and the ant holes in the soil had been dug out and eaten. How could you still find rabbit meat? Also, my father's pants are covered in blood. How can I eat my father's meat? I thought that it would be good if the whole family died together. Then I closed my eyes and lay beside my father and mother's bodies, waiting for death quietly. It was a very good day. There were no clouds in the blue sky and the sun above my head was burning. My father and mother's bones were already smelly. Several hungry wild dogs ran over to eat their meat. I was so angry that I wanted to get up and beat them away, but I didn't have any strength. A wild dog ran over and started to bite my meat. I felt that I was going to die because I couldn't feel the pain. Ning Shu had also died many times before, so she could empathize with the feeling of death. She did not say anything and listened to the energetic boy in front of her. When I was about to die, I vaguely heard footsteps in front of me. Then the owner of the footsteps said, I want him to live. I thought at that time, huh? Is he an immortal? He wants me to live and I can live. The meat on my back was almost eaten by the dogs. Unexpectedly, I survived in the end. Not only did I survive, but I also lived better and better. At that time, almost all the children in our village died. I was the only one who survived. My life was given by young prince. In addition to me, there were also Shiyan Jusi and Tianwen. They were all picked up by young prince from various prefectures. He proudly patted his chest and smiled. So in this world anyone can betray young prince, but we will never. Chapter 85. After listening to his calm narration and looking at his sincere and vivid face, Ning Shu slowly curled up her lips and smiled. I kind of understand why he chose you to serve him. She didn't expect that Xiahou Qing was such a cold person, and had the habit of picking up children everywhere. She really couldn't judge a book by its cover. Ning Shu rubbed the porcelain box in her sleeve. In fact, that man was not as unreasonable as she thought. Huiyemo was curious. Why? He was not very confident. In terms of martial arts, he was not as good as Shiyan. In terms of flexibility, he was not as good as Tianwen. In terms of alertness, he was not as good as Jusi. In addition to the little tricks such as autopsy and disguise, he had always been a little inferior in other aspects. Because there was vitality in your body, which could prevent him from being swallowed by the endless darkness and cold death when he was surrounded by the plum blossom kiss. Ning Shu thought so in her heart. She smiled and did not answer. Then she changed the topic. How many years have you been serving your master? It was almost evening and the appointed time was coming. Ning Shu changed into a full set of clothes and chatted with Hui Mo on the side of the Chili Bridge. I have been serving my master since 10 years ago. In addition to practicing martial arts with my master, I have been serving my master. I am an old man serving my master. Then you should know your master very well. Hui Mo was very confident about this. Of course. No one in the mansion knows young prince better than me. Then let me ask you, what kind of tea does he like to drink? Junshan Silver Needle. What color does he like to wear? Black and black are more often worn. Occasionally he would wear cyan. When he celebrated the princess's birthday, he also wore frost and moonlight once or twice. Ning Shu raised her eyebrows. She always saw that guy wearing black. She didn't expect that he would wear such delicate frost and moonlight. She wondered what he would look like in them. Would he be as gentle and handsome as Yin Ruahui? She stopped her imagination and continued to ask, which master's brush and ink does he like? The sage of painting Wu Daozi. What is the bone he often plays with in his hand? That's... Hui Mo almost blurted out. Xia Hoqing's voice suddenly came from behind him. I remember I reminded you before that the more you know, the faster you will die. Ning Shu was startled. She touched the tip of her nose and said with an embarrassed smile, "Hee, we were just casually chatting. Your Highness need not take it to heart." Xia Hoqing snorted coldly and turned around to walk towards the carriage. Ning Shu smacked her lips regretfully. What a pity. So close. Hui Mo patted his chest with lingering fear. Thank goodness, almost. In the future, when he spoke to this Lady Ning, he had to be 10 times more careful. No, 100 times more careful. He must not be tricked by her again. Otherwise, if he accidentally betrayed the crown prince, how would he have the face to return to the Namping prince's estate? Sob, it was too difficult. Seeing that she did not catch up, Xia Hoqing impatiently urged her. Why are you still standing there? Ning Shu looked over in confusion. She saw Xia Hoqing standing in front of the carriage and reaching out a hand. She looked at her little eunuch uniform, and then silently looked at the sky for a while. Sighing silently, she ran over to take the step stool from Jiu Si's hands and placed it at Xia Hoqing's feet. Finally, she respectfully raised her hands to support Xia Hoqing's arms. Smiling, she said, Master, please. Xia Hoqing's lips curved imperceptibly. He stepped on the stool and got into the carriage. Chapter 86. Inside the third prince's residence. A thin gray figure passed through the doorway and walked into Xiao Yunyan's study. He reported to the prince in embroidered robes. Your Highness, the banquet tonight has been prepared. It's set up in the Copper Sparrow restaurant. We're just waiting for your Highness and the young masters to arrive before the banquet begins. Under the screen painted with vivid images of beauties, Xiao Yunyan looked at the list of girls who had just been disposed of. He was speechless for a long time. Hearing the strategist's voice, he came back to his senses and nodded. The maids serving tonight, the strategist in gray whispered. Don't worry, your Highness. The maids tonight are all new to the residence. No one will be able to find anything that can be used against them. Xiao Yunyan mumbled. That's good. Sixth prince was raised by his mother and is very scheming. He also has the crown prince of Namping. He usually doesn't attend these banquets, but he agreed to my invitation tonight. He's also an unfathomable person. Right now the situation outside is tense. It's better not to take risks. The strategist laughed. His hoarse voice was like a vulture waiting for food in a graveyard. Is your Highness worried about that rumor? Xiao Yunyan's eyebrows jumped. His wrinkled eyebrows were full of hesitation and indecision. The rumor outside is that the female corpse found in Phoenix Terrace is called Nainu. Do you think? The strategist comforted him. Your Highness, don't worry. You're the son of the true dragon. Demons and evil spirits wouldn't dare to act rashly. Also, Furwei saw her take her last breath with his own eyes. It was handled cleanly. The manner also checked. There were no abnormalities. No one will suspect our third prince's residence. That's good. Xiao Yunyan nodded. He lowered his head and continued to look at the list in his hand. He felt that each of his fingers was covered in blood. He immediately turned the list upside down on the table and said hesitantly, "Sir, do you think I'm doing the right thing?" The gray-robed strategist walked over and lit the beauty lamp on the table. He moved the candlelight in front of Xiao Yunyan and said in a hoarse voice, "Your Highness, those who achieve great things do not bother about trifles. Which wise emperor in history did not have blood on his hands before he ascended the throne? To say something disgraceful. Even if it was your imperial father, can you guarantee that he had nothing to do with the chaos in the palace 25 years ago? Then why did His Majesty faint in fright when Empress Zhou's soul returned? Your Highness, you are the eldest son of His Majesty. You should inherit the throne." What he was doing now was just to control those fence-sitters and prevent them from swaying left and right. As for those foolish women, they are infatuated with power and beauty. It has nothing to do with you. After they died, you also took good care of them, so your Highness need not take it to heart. Looking at the dancing candlelight in front of him, Xiao Yunyan looked a little absent-minded. "Is it really like this?" "Yes." The strategist nodded with certainty. He picked up the white handkerchief with the list of names on the table and held it in front of Xiao Yunyan. He bowed and advised carefully, "Since things have already started, there is no reason to give up halfway. For the prosperity of the future, the sacrifice of these ants was their glory. When you inherit the throne and prosper our great you, it will be a blessing for all the people." "Is that so?" "Yes. That's it." The brief hesitation in Xiao Yunyan's eyes was bewitched by the words of the future described in the strategist's words. It broke inch by inch and turned into ferocious persistence. There is no turning back. Necessary sacrifices are indispensable. The death of 100 people in exchange for the people's livelihood. What is wrong with that? I am the eldest son of His Majesty. This throne should be mine. Only I can lead great you back to the peak and create a new prosperity. He opened his red eyes wide and grabbed the list of names. Without hesitation, he placed it on the candle. In an instant, the dancing flames licked the white handkerchief enthusiastically, swallowing the names that represented the lives on it and turning them into black ashes, as if they had never existed. Chapter 87. Tonight, the banquet at the third prince's residence was held in the Copper Sparrow Pavilion. Outside the pavilion, there were many kapok plants that were in full bloom. From afar, they looked like a puff of pink smoke, blending with the purple sunset. It was brilliant and beautiful, but it also looked like blood. Inside the Copper Sparrow Pavilion, all the guests were already seated. Ningxu obediently helped Xiaoqing into the hall. She raised her head and quietly looked around. Xiao Yunyan, Xiao Yuni, and Xiao Yunsen were all present. The eighth prince, Xiao Yunjin, had also been dragged along, accompanied by other noble young masters. More than a dozen beautiful maids were pouring wine for them. The moment Xiaoqing entered, the pavilion fell silent. Everyone looked over and heard the seventh prince, Xiao Yunsen, pursed his lips and said, "Third brother, I knew we shouldn't have invited Xiao's heir." Everyone was shocked. Xiao Yunsen continued, "Look, as soon as he came, all the girls in the pavilion looked in the same direction. They couldn't even pour the wine properly." He pointed. Sure enough, the yellow-robed maid who was pouring wine for him was staring at Xiaoqing in a daze. She didn't even know that the wine was overflowing. Xiao Yunsen continued, "And the maids in purple and red robes over there. Just now they were fighting to serve sixth brother. It really made people jealous. Forget it, forget it. I've already seen it clearly. We ugly people have no way to survive in front of you good-looking people." Boisterous laughter broke out in the hall. Xiao Yunyan, who had always been steady, also joined in. "Seventh brother, you see, I know my place. Who doesn't know that half of the girls in the city are thinking about Xiao's heir, and the other half are thinking about sixth brother? Mediocre people like us should live blindfolded." Amidst the laughter of the crowd, the yellow-robed maidservant's face was crimson red. She hurriedly wiped away the spilled wine, but in the chaos, she made many mistakes. She almost knocked over the entire pot of wine. Fortunately, a white hand reached over and helped her to straighten it in time. She turned her head and looked at Ningxu, who was dressed as a eunuch. She bowed to her gratefully. Thank you, little eunuch. Ning Shu gave her an easygoing smile and continued to support Xiahou Qing as they slowly walked into the hall. She nodded at the various princes and sat in the first seat to the left of Xiao Yunyan. After Xiahou Qing sat down, Ning Shu stood behind him obediently. She suddenly realized that Xiao Yunyi's eyes were on her, but she was not worried and continued to stand there with her head lowered. She looked down at her nose at her mouth and mouth at her heart, acting like a vase that was not worthy of attention. Not too long later, Xiao Yunyi looked away. The young master of the Prime Minister's family was also someone who loved excitement. A few days ago, I heard that His Majesty was discussing with the old imperial concubines to arrange a marriage for your highnesses. What do your highnesses think? We can only survive if the two of you are dealt with. Xiao Yunyi smiled. I already have someone in my heart. Don't make fun of me. If you want to make fun of me, go make fun of Mr. Xiahou. Mr. Xiahou is older than me by a few years, and is not married yet. It can be seen that his taste is not ordinarily high. Who do you like, my 13th royal sister or the 3rd miss of the Qi family? Everyone's attention turned to Xiahou Qing curiously. Ning Shu also looked at his steady back and was very interested in his answer. Xiahou Qing took a sip of wine and put it down, saying lightly, no matter who it is, the person who marries me is destined to be a widow. Who does your highness think I should marry? Xiao Yunyi was speechless. Ning Shu couldn't help but want to laugh. Xiao Yunyi originally wanted to kick this hot rubber ball to Xiahou Qing, but he didn't expect to be choked by Xiahou Qing's words. Everyone knew that Xiahou Qing's health was not good. No matter if he answered Princess Chongping or Qi San, it was because he wanted them to be widows. However, her eyes quietly landed on Xiahou Qing's back. These words were too sad. She didn't know why, but Ning Shu's heart suddenly couldn't bear it. Chapter 88. Young Master Tan, who started this topic, immediately tried to smooth things over. Young Master Xiahou, you're wrong. I've heard from a few of my cousins that if they could marry His Highness, they would be willing to die even if they had to. Even if I were a woman, I'm afraid that I would also kneel before His Highness. After young Master Tan finished speaking, he casually pointed at Ning Shu. What's your name? Ning Shu regained her senses and immediately replied respectfully. This servant is called Yan Gui. Young Master Tan continued to ask. If you were a woman and I asked you to marry His Highness, would you be willing? Ning Shu was stunned and hurriedly pretended to be ashamed. This servant is a heaven-defying person. How would I dare? Young Master Tan waved his hand. We're only talking about hypotheticals. What kind of sin had she committed that she had to be kicked into such a piping hot ball? Ning Shu lowered her head in shame and said shyly, Of course, I'm willing. When her words entered his ears, the wine cup in Xiahou Qing's hand shook slightly, but he quickly steadied it with his fair hand. He pursed his thin lips and didn't say anything. The atmosphere that had cooled down immediately heated up again. Xiao Yunsan giggled. Look, this little eunuch's face is red, ha 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 ha. Ning Shu's face wasn't red earlier, but it turned red from his words. Last time, she was caught talking about her feelings behind his back, and this time, she said that she was willing to marry him in front of him. What was going on? She turned her head sideways, not knowing how to face Xiahou Qing. As the host, Xiao Yunyan changed the topic. Sixth brother, you've returned victorious from suppressing the bandits. Let me give you a toast. Xiao Yunyan's gaze landed on Ning Shu for the second time. Hearing Xiao Yunyan's voice, he looked back and said, Thank you, royal brother, for your praise. After drinking with everyone, Xiao Yunyan put down his wine cup and chuckled. The bandits on Mount Yanxi have been causing trouble for many years. Unfortunately, that is one of the important routes from the north to the capital. Who knows how many people have been harmed? It is said that in city's Ho family, Bo families do family, and one family almost lost their lives there. 2 years ago, Imperial Father had sent several groups of people, but none of them had been able to wipe out the bandits. I didn't expect Sixth Brother to succeed so quickly and close this case. It's really a great thing. Xiao Yunjin took over the conversation and sighed. The case of Mount Flame Breath is over. Now there's only the case of Phoenix Terrace left in the capital. It's really a headache. That day, Imperial Father saw Empress Zhou's ghost with his own eyes. When he returned to the palace, he fell ill and hasn't recovered yet. Another son of Minister Li was puzzled. What's so great about Ningxu? Why did the Empress give her the Phoenix Terrace case? Isn't she afraid that she'll mess things up even more? Young Master Tan smiled. There's something you don't know. The world now knows that she's known for bringing misfortune to her husband through 3 marriages. In fact, in the early years, she was known as a female prodigy. She followed her master, Master Hui Ci, to solve several cases consecutively. Even His Majesty praised her. Xiao Yunjin was the youngest among them and was very curious. So great? Pick a few cases and tell me about them. Xiao Yunyan said cheerfully. Your 6th brother is here. Let him talk. The first case she solved when she was 5 years old was your 6th brother's. 6th brother? Those who were sitting there exchanged glances. That incident happened when His Highness' 6th brother was down and out. Who would want to tell others about what happened when they were at their worst for fun? Xiao Yunyan also realized that his words would offend someone. Just as he was thinking about how to smooth things over, Xiao Yuni raised his head and drank the wine at the bottom of the cup in one gulp. He slowly said, back then, before I was taken in by Imperial Mother, I was by Yin Zhaoi's side. Everyone began to listen attentively. One time, I accidentally offended someone. 3 days later, a golden hairpin appeared in my bookcase. It was a relic left behind by the late Empress Dowager, and was given to Consort Qi before she died. I couldn't explain it and could only kneel outside Qian Palace to prove myself. At that time, she followed Princess Xian into the palace to pay her respects and accompanied Consort Qi and the other consorts to admire the flowers in the small garden. After hearing my story, no one was willing to speak up for me. She suddenly pointed at me and said, Mother, is this little brother stupid? Chapter 89. Xiao Yunsan tapped his chopsticks. How bold. Xiao Yuni's lips curled up as a gentle smile appeared on his handsome face that was completely different from his usual aloof temperament. At that time, his heart was immersed in despair. When he suddenly heard that this little girl was also kicking him while he was down, he was furious and thought that if there was a day when he could make a comeback, he would definitely make her regret it. Unexpectedly. Then I heard her say, if he wasn't stupid, he would have immediately thrown it into the pond or buried it in the ground after stealing it. Why would he stupidly put it in such an obvious place like a book box? Was he afraid that people wouldn't know he stole it? Or was he too poor? That shouldn't be the case. If I stole something valuable, I would have immediately exchanged it for something delicious or fun. If I really had no other choice, I would have melted it into a lump of gold. I wouldn't have left it there for a few days without dealing with it. Young Master Tan laughed. That's true. That's true. Xiao Yuni skipped the part where Consort Qi scolded her for her audacity, and continued to narrate. She walked unsteadily in front of Consort Qi and bowed, saying, Reporting to Your Highness, my daughter has learned fortune-telling from a roadside fortune-teller and knew who stole the golden hairpin. She was only 5 years old at the time. Although I was grateful that she was willing to speak up for me, I didn't dare to believe that she had the ability. However, she was the only one who was willing to stand up for me at that time, so I could only place my hopes on her. I saw her tugging at my hand as she closed her eyes and muttered to herself. Then she picked up the golden hairpin and brought it to her nose. She said, Your Highness, the golden hairpin just told me that it wasn't stolen by His Highness. Xiao Yunjin couldn't help but snort, disbelief written all over his face. Isn't that nonsense? You're willing to believe it? Xiao Yuni couldn't help but look in Ningxu's direction. Looking at her lowered eyes, he drank 2 more cups of wine. At that time, I also wanted to advise her not to get involved in this mess. But she said crisply, Ladies, please take a look. His Highness' 6 hands have so many frostbites, and he applied a thick layer of ointment. This ointment has a strong and pungent smell, and you'll get it on you as long as you touch something. But this little girl smelled the fragrance of the golden hairpin, and didn't smell at all. Therefore, I feel that His Highness the 6th Prince has been framed. As for the real thief, It should be the sixth prince's attendant. Xiao Yunjin and the others' curiosity was piqued. How did she know? There are 3 reasons. First, His Highness the Sixth Prince did not find the golden hairpin when he used the book box today. This means that the golden hairpin was just stuffed into the book box not long ago. Only he knows when His Highness the Sixth Prince uses the book box, and when he does not use it. Secondly, His Highness the Sixth Prince found this golden hairpin in his bookcase. After all, as the study companion who carried the bookcase, he was also guilty of not taking care of it properly. However, when His Highness the Sixth Prince knelt down to explain himself, he stood leisurely to the side and watched the excitement. It was clear that he and His Highness were not of the same mind. As for the third one, this little girl looked down on him. She first looked at his legs and feet, and then saw that the soles of his feet were stained with red mud. This humble girl had once heard the gardener in the estate mention that this red mud was very precious. This humble girl had just followed my mother to visit the various concubines, and discovered that only Consort Chi's garden had this kind of mud. Therefore, this humble girl thought that this page boy must have been punished by His Highness the Sixth Prince and harbored a grudge in his heart. Thus, he secretly sneaked into the concubine's place to steal the golden hairpin and frame His Highness the Sixth Prince. After Xiao Yuni finished speaking, everyone was suddenly enlightened. Then they clicked their tongues and exclaimed, "She has such observational skills at the age of 5, and her analysis is so logical. She's really extraordinary." Later on, there were a few unsolved cases that were solved because she raised doubts for Master Hui Xi. It seems that the Phoenix Terrace case can really be solved by her. Behind Xiaoqing, as Ningxu listened to Xiao Yuni's narration, her thoughts could not help but fly back to 300 years ago. At that time, everything had yet to happen. She had almost forgotten that she had really been childhood sweethearts with Xiao Yuni, and they had spent their innocent years together. The piece of flesh in her chest that she thought had long died gave off a faint throbbing pain. "You're Ningxu?" After helping him clear his name and waiting for the crowd to disperse, Xiao Yuni, who was still a down-and-out youth, chased after her and lowered his head to ask her. She couldn't remember how she answered. She only remembered that he had used that handful of frostbites to hold her hand, and then wrote the 3 words Xiao Yuni on her palm. He had said, "Remember, this is my name. You helped me once, and I'll repay you with a lifetime." A lifetime. Bitter ripples appeared on her lips. She had been full of expectations for what kind of life it would be, but in the end, "Are you dumb?" Xiaoqing's voice suddenly rang in her ears. "Pour me wine." Ningxu immediately regained her senses and bowed to pour wine for him. He took a sip and put it down with a frown. "It's not good. It's a little bitter. Pour it again." Ningxu looked at the grape wine that the servants had just sent over in confusion. Could it be that it was a little bitter because it had just been opened? She immediately poured another cup. Xiaoqing took another sip and frowned again. "Continue to pour it again." Ningxu continued to pour it again. It was not until she poured it 4 times in a row that her patience ran out, and she was about to explode when she heard him say lightly, "I'm sober now. Are you sober now?" Chapter 90. Since you're awake, let's get down to business. I didn't come here today to waste my time with you. For some reason, Xiaoqing's voice sounded particularly cold, like a block of ice. Caught off guard, Ningxu had a confused expression on her face. She had no idea how she had offended this young master. TSK. A man's heart is really hard to find. Fortunately, Ningxu was magnanimous and didn't argue with him. She softly replied, "Yes." Taking advantage of the fact that everyone was in a heated discussion, and no one was paying attention to her, she quietly retreated from the hall. After the yellow-robed maidservant finished serving, she followed the other maidservants out with wine pots and cups. She saw someone looking for something in the courtyard with his head lowered. She took a closer look and recognized that it was the little eunuch who helped her in the hall. She hesitated for a moment, and was a few steps behind the others. She walked toward Ningxu and thanked her solemnly. "Young eunuch, thank you for helping me. Otherwise, I wouldn't have escaped punishment today." Ningxu looked up and recognized her. She smiled modestly and said, "It's just a small matter. It's not worth Mrs. concern." Then she anxiously bent down and continued to search in the grass. The yellow-robed maid asked curiously, "What are you looking for?" Ning-Shu frowned. "My amulet." But she didn't find anything in the grass. Just as she was about to sigh sadly, her eyes suddenly slid over the yellow-robed maid. She showed a surprised expression. "Ah, I've been looking for it for a long time. It turns out it was with Miss." The yellow-robed maid looked down in surprise and found a small yellow amulet in her skirt. She quickly took it off and handed it to her. "Are you talking about this?" Ning-Shu quickly took it. "Maybe when I was holding the wine pot, I accidentally caught it on Mrs. Pendant. It's really good that you didn't lose it. That's really good. Is this amulet very important to you?" Ning-Shu carefully touched the amulet and then carefully put it in her sleeve. Her eyes were full of treasure and sadness. "Of course. This is the only thing my sister left for me before we parted. If I lose it, I won't have it anymore." Those who were good-looking would eat better wherever they went. Although Ning-Shu was dressed like a eunuch, her face was particularly delicate and pretty. Her bright eyes were full of sadness, making people feel pity for this young man. The yellow-robed maid could not help but ask, "Did something happen to your sister?" Ning-Shu's eyes were filled with tears. She forced a smile and said, "Miss, you may not know this, but my family met with a disaster several years ago. My family? My elder sister and I were taken away by human traffickers and sold separately. Since then, we have lost contact with each other." Later on, after many years of hard work, I found out that elder sister had been sold to a prince's mansion to make a living. However, there are many princes in the capital, and I really don't know which one. I'm afraid that I won't be able to find elder sister in my entire life. If it wasn't for the fact that they had nowhere else to go, who would sell themselves to others as a slave? The yellow-robed maid felt the same way. She asked with sympathy, "What's your sister's name? Tell me, maybe it's in our third prince's residence." Ning-Shu looked expectant. "Really? Thank you, miss. My elder sister's name is Wanlu. I don't know if miss has heard of her before?" She was talking about one of the remaining girls in the dance troupe. The yellow-robed maid thought carefully and then said, "Wanlu. I have vaguely heard this name before, but I've only been in the palace for 2 months, so I'm not familiar with her. I only know that she fell sick a while ago and was sent by His Highness to a farm outside the city to recuperate." "Really? That's great. I've worn out iron shoes for many years, but I never thought that I would actually find her. Mrs. Great Kindness, this humble one will never forget it." Ning-Shu excitedly bowed to her with clasped hands. The yellow-robed maid quickly helped her up. Ning-Shu wiped away her excited tears and asked in confusion, "If she was only sick, why did she have to be sent outside the city?" The yellow-robed maid smiled and said, "You don't know this. The first day I entered the palace, I heard from the housekeeper that the servants in our third prince's palace are not like the servants in other palaces. No matter if you're sick or injured, as long as you have one breath left, you have to continue working for the master. His Highness the Third Prince treats us very well. Anyone who falls sick, he doesn't force us to take care of them. Instead, he sends them to a farm to recuperate. If they're willing to come back after they recover, they can continue working. If they're not willing, when they recover, they'll find a good family to marry into as a reward for serving the master. So, to be able to work in the third prince's palace is a blessing from my previous life, don't you think?" The young girl's heart was filled with respect and joy. "So it's like that." Ning-Shu nodded seriously and smiled. "Then it's a great blessing. But I don't know which farm it is outside the city?" The yellow-robed maid shook her head and said, "That I don't know. You'll have to ask the housekeeper. But the housekeeper is busy and doesn't allow us to ask." She wanted to say something, but a steward mama suddenly walked to the corner of the hallway and pointed at her, reprimanding, "I was wondering why the number of people was wrong. So you're here to laze around. The guests are still waiting in the hall. Do you not want to live anymore?" The yellow-robed maid didn't have time to greet Ning-Shu. She hurriedly ran over and quietly begged the mama for mercy. The mama forcefully pinched her, and then looked at Ningshu from a distance across the hallway. Her eyes were very cold. Ningshu returned a shy and harmless smile. You're tuning in to the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.